Hey everyone, it's Alan Schimmel for Techstrong Gang. It's kind of an AI Monday here. You know, I used to love this song by Warren Zevon, and to paraphrase it, today's going to be about send lawyers AI and money. All that and more on Techstrong Gang. All right. Hey, happy Monday, everyone. Welcome to Techstrong Gang as we kick off another episode of the gang here, followed by our usual full broadcast of Techstrong TV, including podcasts and sessions and interviews and all things tech. So keep your dial right here. I don't even know if that's a right word anymore, keep your dial. Who has a dial? But anyway, I do remember the days where we turned to dial. That was my job in my house. I was the remote control growing up. But anyway, we've got a great show, a lot of AI themes today. Let me introduce you to who we have on with me. First of all, from Philadelphia, and we're not going to get into the whole thing we got last time about brotherly love and Hackavision or whatever it was. Our managing editor for DevOps.com and Security Boulevard, Sharon Florentine. Welcome, Sharon.
Hey, thanks for having me back.
Oh, it's always a pleasure to have you back. I mean, you're part of the gang.
Right.
Speaking of gang members, though, one of our roving gang members, I don't know what she does when she's not on the gang, but actually I do know what she does, but she'll tell us. Joining us from, I think, home in New Mexico, our own Tracy Reagan. Hey, Tracy, how are you?
Hey, Alan. Hope you're enjoying your time in Paris.
Well,
wish I was there.
Yes, we're going to talk about that right off the bat. So Mike Vizard and I are out in Paris for KubeCon, which kicks off tomorrow, actually. Actually, tomorrow is day zero. KubeCon officially, I think, starts Wednesday. And we'll be here Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, broadcasting live, streaming live, and we'll be repeating it throughout the day. So no matter what time zone you're in the world, you can catch our KubeCon coverage from wherever you are. And this year, we're working in partnership with the CNCF. They're sponsoring a lot of the videos there. And so we'll be having a lot of the maintainers and larger sponsors of the show on our Techstrong TV broadcast, as well as maybe some surprises. Stay tuned. We'll bring some extra programming your way. Anyway, though, let me introduce our last gang member today. He's not with me here in Boca Raton Techstrong headquarters. He's up in Paris, but we have our Chief Content Officer, Mike Vizard. Hey, Mike.
Hey, happy to be here as always.
Absolutely. There's something to be said for Paris in springtime, as they say.
There you go.
But Mike, why don't you kick it off for us today? What are we covering?
All right. Well, it looks like tech bros are having a rumble in the alley. We got Elon Musk has filed a lawsuit against OpenAI and Sam Altman in particular, because as far as I can tell, they violated some agreement many years ago where OpenAI was supposed to be only producing models for the good of humanity. And then somewhere along the way, they decided to become a commercial entity. And Elon Musk apparently says he signed some sort of founding agreement and filed a lawsuit to that effect. By all accounts, the lawsuit is, shall we say, rambling. But, it's Elon. It is, the nature of the beast with him. So that's just part and parcel of the drama, I would say. But I frankly cannot tell if there's merit to this case or not, because he's basically saying, you guys changed the rules, but, they got the board to approve the changes in the rules. So I don't know. Tracy, you run a business. What's your take on all this?
When I first saw this story, I thought to myself, okay, if I was a juror sitting on this case, knowing what I know about software and running a software company and understanding who Elon Musk is, who's brilliant, understands what it requires to build software, he never believed that it was going to stay open. There is no way you can build a chat GPT or anything close to it in an open source world. I personally believe it's impossible. There's a lot of money that's gone behind this, and you just are not going to get that kind of support in an open source structure. I mean, we have great tools that have come. We've got Linux, as an open source, but it took years and years to develop it over time. Then we've got Kubernetes on top of it. There's awesome tools like Jenkins in the DevOps world. But to be honest, to build a brand new kind of software and to build that kind of that data, it's going to take more than an open source group of contributors. He never believed it, and we'll see if Grok takes off. If he's got his XAI and he has Grok, he's going to open source. But how long is he going to then leave that open source?
Until he can make money off of it. And here's the thing, it wasn't necessarily that it was supposed to be open, it was supposed to be non-commercial, which means it wasn't going to be making profits or whatever. And there are still in AI, like Microsoft's investment in AI, for instance, is not like a traditional investment. They get a certain percentage of OpenAI's revenue until they make back their money, and then their kind of ownership, if you will, in OpenAI starts to diminish. So there has been that tip of the cap to kumbaya, goodness. But let's face it, Elon Musk bringing this suit, this is like last week when Donald Trump said he's honest Don, right? There's not much of a difference here. For me, the cherry on the cake is Sam Altman produces the emails from Elon that when he resigned from the board, it was because he was pissed that he couldn't take OpenAI and make a part of Tesla, because I'm sure he wasn't going to make any money from Tesla by using this, right? So, he who hath no sin should throw the first rock. This man he's not even allowed near rocks. So, I would toss this suit on a summary judgment and make them pay every dollar that OpenAI has to put into lawyer fees.
Yeah, I'm with you there 100%. And I'm sort of getting tired of people with money using our court system in frivolous ways and getting away with it.
Absolutely. And I think, not that OpenAI is an angel or, that they have all these pure intentions, but if it's not OpenAI, it's going to be the Chinese or the Russian or Google or someone else. And let's stop pretending here. This is warfare in the 21st century. Is not necessarily fought with guns and planes or even drones. It's fought over IP rights.
It's two emperors going into battle, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to wait for the movie, though. It kind of reminds me of that old Michael Douglas movie with where greed is good.
Gordon Gekko.
This whole thing out, except it's in Silicon Valley instead of Wall Street.
Well, they've had some movies about that one too, right? There was the Social Network about Facebook and that, and I don't know. I've said enough.
I'm willing to look on the positive side of this kind of a case. Who knows if this does go to, continues through the process and goes to some kind of a court hearing and a jury. What would we learn? What would we learn about building these companies, especially ones that are, want to be, a free license and allow people to use it? I think we'd learn a lot about how these organizations are structured. And I believe that there's something to know about that. There's something to know when a Microsoft takes over so much of a particular IP that the world could take advantage of. So maybe there's a side of him that has, maybe like just a little bit that has something to say about it. I don't know if he would have continued down the road of being completely kind of, I think he's a for-profit man, but having a trial might expose some information that we don't know. We don't hear behind the scenes. So
I think,
like
contrary,
Mike said, maybe the show.
maybe it would be a good show, but I think, frankly, the OpenAI model has been very open, not open source, but we know what the governing documents were. We know what the fine print was on the Microsoft investment. But here's something else I think we've got to do. We can't equate all of AI or even all of generative AI with OpenAI. Yes, they were first with ChatGPT. But you know what? Google is not a slacker. And they've got DeepMind, and they've, tried now 2 or 3 different kind of launches on this. But sooner or later, they're going to get it right. They will compete. Apple just bought or recently bought an AI company. I don't know if we've covered that, but I saw it in the news and I don't have it in front of me at this moment. But they bought an AI company and they're doing their thing on it. Meta has it. And, every company is working, and it kind of leads us into the other things we're looking at in LLMs and SLMs and all these things. But every one of these hyperscalers is working on their own AI engine.
And there's a bunch of startups too, like Anthropic and all kinds of folks running around.
Anthropic and some of the others.
Advances.
We're only, in the beginning of what's going to be a marathon here. Let's see who has the kick down that final stretch.
Sharon, do you think that people's reputations will get tarnished as a result of all this? Because there's a certain amount of halo effect that goes on in the tech sector where we're doing good things for humanity and all this other stuff. And it may come out that, this is just pure, ego activity.
I mean, my super cynical side, which is probably 99% of my personality, let's be honest, that side of me says, there was a report that I read in the news that was talking about something like Twitter/X lost 30% of its subscribers or users in the last year. And this whole discussion makes me think, how much is he scrambling for funds and sees OpenAI as, all right, well, maybe they're making some money and I can take advantage of that. And, then my second thought would be, I'm not sure how much more tarnish can be applied in these situations. I think there's always going to be the stan camp that these tech bros that folks hold up and put on pedestals can do no wrong. And then there's, the great divide. And the other side is everything that they do is evil. I kind of think, despite how cynical I tend to be, that the truth is somewhere in the middle. But I don't know that this is going to change anyone's mind about these folks' personalities.
Yeah.
I think part of it is what Tracy alluded to, though, right? This could just be one big giant PR move because everybody's going, oh, Elon's got an AI platform now, but probably weren't talking about it as much as they were 3 days ago.
Right.
That's another good point. But I got to tell you, the drama of this one, you got Elon Musk involved. That's like, that's almost as good as Taylor Swift, almost. But but quite frankly, what happened with Altman a couple of weeks or 2 months ago, whatever, when the board fired him and then he came riding back in, and we haven't seen the likes of that in tech since Steve Jobs. And I don't know if Steve did it as dramatically as Altman and the OpenAI story. That'll make for a good movie.
Oh yeah.
Well, I kind of relate Elon Musk to a Steve Jobs, actually.
Oh, Steve's turning in his grave. Don't say that.
OpenAI may have been like, we got to get rid of Elon Musk. What are we going to do? Who knows? But I mean, there may be a backstory we haven't heard yet.
So do you have any candidates for who's going to play Elon Musk and who's going to play Sam Altman?
Oh, wow. That's a good question.
Oh,
Elon Musk, I would put the guy, what was he just in? He played Napoleon, Joaquin Phoenix.
Oh, Joaquin.
I think he'd make a good Elon Musk.
He would.
Yes. And Sam Altman, maybe...
Jonah Hill?
Nah. He's too comedic.
Maybe Cillian Murphy.
That would be a good one. That would be a good one, yeah. Here we are playing Hollywood producer. Who knew on Techstrong Gang? Gang, let's take a break and let's come back with our next one, okay? We'll be back in a second.
right, we're back and we're talking about what the European Union is up to with AI, because they at least have now agreed to something that will eventually become a law. And if you look at it closely, this framework that they are passing basically says that we will apply different levels of restrictions based on what we think is the level of risk associated with any given AI initiative. So they're going to, I guess they're saying that they're going to create some sort of sliding scale. It's not quite clear to me how they're going to enforce all that. But Alan, you got some thoughts about where you're going to see these regulations? Are we just going to copy that around the world, or is there going to be different regulations everywhere? And how much of a mess are we looking at?
Well, first of all, I applaud the AI for at least trying to do something. We seem not to be able to get out of our own way here. We've had the presidential commission putting out stuff in CISA and private industries here in the U.S. talking about regulations of AI. But like everything else in our country, it seems we just don't have the political will to get things done. On the other hand, the EU does. Do they sometimes, I think, go over the line toward, on the heavy hand? Perhaps. What I'm hoping is that, it's like hemming pants. If you cut the pants and make them too short, you can never make them longer. But if you do the hem and you still need to take a little more off, you could always do that. And I hope that's not what we have here, where the EU has made it so draconian that it inhibits the free flow and progress and evolution of this really important technology. Now, in terms of, other jurisdictions following suit, the fact of the matter is we live in a small world after all, like the song says, and we don't need other jurisdictions to follow suit. If you're doing business on the internet, if you're on the internet, chances are you're interacting with EU consumers, EU-based companies, and it applies to you whether you're within those borders or not. You have to, the same as GDPR. So, I think the EU standard will be the standard until we get our act together, maybe over here. And of course, the EU can have all the standards they want. The Chinese thumb their nose at it. So do the Russians, obviously. So, as I said, it's a crazy mixed up world, except for Lola.
Yes, so Tracy,
It's gonna
what's
be-
your...
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Sharon.
I was going to say it's going to be interesting to see how the EU's push meshes with what happened here in the States. Late last year, I believe there was the agreement between Microsoft, Google, Meta, OpenAI. I don't know if Apple was involved in that, but there were a number of companies that got together in a consortium type group led by the White House that were trying to commit to standards around safe AI development. And obviously, that's a lot looser than a regulatory framework with, actual mandates that are written in law. But it'll be interesting to see how closely those two things track and where the hem is longer and where the hem is shorter, to use Alan's analogy.
Tracy, is any of this stuff worth the paper it's written on?
So, I believe that what the EU is trying to do is worthy of their effort. I think it's interesting that they're taking the leadership role on this, and I'm sorry that we can't, as Alan pointed out. I do believe that there should be some oversight around the kind of the areas that they actually pointed out. I think it was health and safety, personal freedoms and democracy. If there's AI in those areas, I think that it should have maybe even self-driving cars might be something we should include. I guess that would be safety, right?
Yeah.
I think that's something that we should be focused on. I would have loved to see this kind of discussion come out of the U.S. It bothers me that we are not leading the discussion. And what I have found, to Sharon's point, that we have consortiums now of these I like to call them, the giants, and this is in almost every open kind of source foundation I have worked with. There's always these giants, and they sort of try to lead the discussion, and they tag somebody to within their organization to work on it. That person may not be super passionate about that. It's just that's their job that they have to face. And it's not, I don't really think it's a serious effort. I see that in other, community involvement that I have. It doesn't mean it's that serious of an effort. So if the government does it, it's going to have to be a lot more serious, and they're going to have to take a much deeper look at it. And it can't just be, saying we have a check mark out there. We created this AI security symposium or consortium, and we're going to start having discussions about it. Because if we even look at what's going on with TikTok in the US, I'm sure that if it was reversed and we had a TikTok in China, that we would be able to get any of the Chinese demographics data from it. They would chop us off at the knees. They would never let a piece of software like that into their culture. So to me, this discussion around AI security, cybersecurity, things like TikTok is all the same conversation. It's how do we secure software regardless of what kind of software it is. Now, I know that AI has some particular attributes, let's just say, like being able to put somebody's head on a porn scene. That would be horrifying to me. And I would hope that there'd be a way to, hold somebody accountable if that happened. So we have to have this discussion, and I'm glad the EU is taking it on, and I'm glad that they did call out particular areas that they wanted to find that risk around. I think they're going in the right direction. Will they have to scale back in the future? I don't know. I'm guessing they're going to have to add to it.
I think they will have to add to it because I'm a little dubious of the whole let's define risk, right? We've been talking about trying to define risk in the land of cybersecurity for decades, and we've made almost hardly any progress. So who's going to stand around and actually agree that the level of risk with this particular implementation of something is, beyond what we're willing to consider? Who has that opinion? Who ultimately makes that call? Because I could put 10 people in a room and they'll never agree.
Or 12 angry men.
How's it regulated? If somebody is breaking the law in Russia for a piece of software that's running in the UK, how do we? It's like, I live out on a rural road. There's 5 homes here, and somebody decided that our dirt road, they didn't want anybody going more than 30 miles an hour. Now, it's hard to go more than 30 miles an hour, but I tend to. But who's going to give me a ticket? They put a sign up, but okay, it's a sign. Sometimes I just honestly give it the finger. It's just a sign standing there on the dirt road.
In the case of EU, they can set sanctions if the fine wasn't paid, right?
Yes,
they can. Because the whole putting aside this AI thing, look at GDPR, but look at any of the EU rules that don't even apply necessarily around technology. Their shtick is, because let's face it, EU is not a country, it's a union, right? But their thing is, look, if you want to do business with our population, with our jurisdictions, you got to play by our rules. Otherwise, you can't do business with us. And when you think about that, that's a very modern economic, socio-political theory right there, right? We're going to use the big stick of our economic muscle to force you to play by our rules. Now, it didn't work so good in telling Russia not to attack Ukraine, right? They put all these sanctions in, as did we. But, you got a leaky back door, the China and India, who don't play by those rules. But if you want to do business with the EU, and as a bloc, it's the size of the US comparably, you got to play by their rules. That's what they're saying. And if they, if they enforce that, it could have some teeth.
Well, I hope the area that they first really look at is, and this is just because it's an interest of mine, is, being able to, if there's a high risk software vulnerability out there, It definitely should be illegal, and there should be some serious consequences as somebody tampers with that vulnerability, right? And uses AI to enhance that vulnerability's impact. And that was one of the areas that they did talk about, because that we can measure. As Mike pointed out, it's sometimes hard to measure this stuff, but we know when we have a high risk vulnerability. So I think there's low hanging fruit that we can look at, and I hope most companies who they're trying to make money in the EU or the United States, I think will comply. But what about all the bad actors that we don't even know who is
Right.
actually pushed that vulnerability and then exploit it even further?
Is a bad actor going to say, "Oh my, I just broke the law in the EU"? Well, not unless
Precisely.
Interpol is knocking on my door and emptying my bank account. Then I might care.
Exactly.
We actually had a piece on Security Boulevard this week talking about that, what Tracy was alluding to, that the DOJ here is now, they're going to take into account whether or not you use AI in certain crimes, and that would result in harsher sentences.
Right. And I'm all
interesting-
for it.
Yeah, that's really interesting when you think about using AI to commit crimes. It makes it really scary.
Right.
I suppose if I rob a store with a gun versus a bat, it makes a difference, right? So it's the same thing with AI.
It's like a
right?
felony murder kind of charge, right? Using AI is a contributing factor that ratchets up, whether it's a C felony to an A felony or something like that.
I'm not sure, though, that we all agree that on the severity rating of vulnerabilities, I've yet to meet a developer who agreed with the severity rating that anybody was assigned any vulnerability.
Well, but there's more to vulnerabilities than severity. Are they exploitable? Are they reachable? There's nuances there that may be lost on a general pop, person. And we've seen a similar thing, by the way, in the U.S., right? They CISA and some of the others have come out with new regs that say, software has to be free of serious vulnerabilities. Well, it's only free of serious vulnerabilities as of this second one. I didn't know that was a vulnerability. As soon as I found out, then yeah. Anyway, it's an interesting thing. It goes round and round. Where she stops, I don't know. But let's take a break, and we'll be back with our third block here in just a moment.
Cloud Native Now is the web's leading resource for the growing cloud native ecosystem. CloudNativeNow.com is your destination for news, thought leadership, features, and webinars on cloud native architecture, Kubernetes, serverless, cloud native application development, microservices, service mesh, cloud native security, and more. Stay on the cutting edge of modern application development at Cloud Native Now.
All right, folks, we're back, and we're talking about now the cost of LLMs and AI and all these platforms that are out there, because it turns out it gets pretty expensive pretty quickly. Every prompt requires a token, not just one token, two tokens. You can need one for the inbound request and one for the outbound request, and you get charged for each token. A lot of the organizations that I'm talking to are starting to figure out they can only really afford to maybe do one project, maybe two. They can't launch a bunch of these things at the same time because it gets too expensive pretty quickly. There's a story up on Techstrong.ai from talking about how Data IQ has added some ability to monitor the cost consumption of these LLMs. I think that's going to be a bigger issue as we get deeper into these kinds of projects. But Tracy, what's your thought about the way the LLMs are accessed, priced, and what are the cost implications?
Well, first of all, I was pleasantly surprised when I saw that article, their announcements about what they're doing. I never thought about it, to be honest. You think about the technology and you get excited about the technology and you don't dig down. We did that with Kubernetes, to be quite honest. We didn't think about the cost of Kubernetes and how to manage that cost. So I feel like tools that are starting to support the infrastructure of these AI models are going to be popping up everywhere, because I think there's more than just tracking the cost. There is watching the transactions, because we always like to do that, right? And there's going to be more than one agent, right? Per LLM. It's not just one agent. So it could get pretty expensive. Not only that, the data in this world is so fragmented. The idea of having tools that allow us to see the information in a more aggregated way in everything that we do is going to become important. So I'm pretty excited about seeing some of these, I would call them operational tools, start to be brought forward, because it really does mean that we have arrived in a place that I like to call applied AI. And it's just not a few of the big companies. It's not just ChatGPT. It's not just Google or Microsoft who's working on it. We are all starting to implement AI into software. And the more operational tools we have around that, the more likely that we'll be successful. So kudos, and let's hope we see more of them.
You know, we spoke about this in, I think it was last week, one of the gang episodes last week when we had Bonnie Schneider on, which was the cost of running these AIs, right? In terms of electricity and water usage and, you know, cooling down these machines that are running them. But I think this is typical of technology innovation. Is first you just want to make the damn thing work and prove that out. Then you start optimizing, right? You start shrinking the transistor. We don't use, but you know, you start shrinking transistors and, you know, making things better optimized, more efficient. And I think this is just the first, you know, it's the opening leg of a much longer race in terms of that, you know, you got to know there's a problem before you can solve the problem. And this is part of knowing there's a problem and saying, okay, now we need to optimize this. And there's always smart people. Brad Feld, who I worked a lot with, he funded all of the startup companies I was involved in, and one of the smartest people I know. He always said these things are evolutionary, not revolutionary. You'll get that one revolutionary thing, but then it's followed by all of these baby steps of evolution that optimize it and shine it up and take the rough edges off to make it truly commercially viable. And we may look back on this 3-5 years from now and say that's what was going on right now with this kind of stuff, right? We can't build every data center and into a hydroelectric dam, and we've got to bring the cost down of LLMs. And there might be other ways of doing it, right? Maybe we do smaller LLMs. Maybe we have very, you know, specialized LLMs, and we switch out ones that are more efficient for a particular job. Well, you know, that's what humans do.
Sharon, does any of this sound familiar? I give you a small taste of something, and then you get like it, and then you get addicted.
It's almost like it's following a very similar trajectory to the evolution of cloud computing. Does that ring a bell for anyone? And but what sticks out for me is that it's taken us a decade longer to get to the point where we need to start implementing FinOps and cloud cost management and all of those as we figure out just how much we're spending on that. But, you know, with the AI evolution, we've really reached that point a heck of a lot faster, or at least we're paying attention to
it's AI time.
The flags that are waving.
Right. Continuing crunching down that time factor. It just seems.
Yep.
So wait, did you just invent a new buzzword? Fin AI ops? Come on, we
Oh, I did. Oh, I gotta patent that.
I like AI FinOps.
FinOps.
Fame.
Yeah, let's not try to create a word out of that.
Just what the world needs, another acronym.
I know.
Yes, yeah.
Very cool stuff.
Well, but I would argue too that at some point I'm going to use an AI model to keep track of my AI costs to optimize. So I'm going to use the AI to govern and manage the AI, right? Because
Yep.
But that's the nightmare scenario,
where it's
Right.
regulating itself.
Well, and then it starts replicating itself. And then is it alive? Ooh. But when software writes software. And
Yeah.
Well, I'm lazy. I just want my service provider to provide me that information. It should be part of the service.
Good luck with that. It'll be on your cell phone bill. Go find it. But speaking of this, though, I got to tell you, I was out at dinner last night, and I was out in a restaurant in Miami that just opened, but it's a New York staple. And Mike probably knows it, called Raos, R-A-O-S. They make the sauce, though. They sold the sauce business. Fantastic restaurant, by the way. If you're down in Miami, at Miami Beach, it's at the Lowe's Hotel. But we were talking about AI at the table, 3 couples. I'm the only tech dude there. But they're all dabbling, and 2 of the wives hadn't even used it ever, including my own. But be that as it may, I said something, and in talking about it, I realized that I've already become dependent on AI to help me with my writing. Not that I just take articles that AI writes and give them to Sharon to publish. At least she doesn't know. But
I know when you do that.
But I often will start with an AI generated and then make it my own, or take mine, put it into AI and say, make it more persuasive or more punchy. And it's not just articles, it's the abstracts for events, it's my emails, it's just so much easier to kick off your writing, no matter what it is you're writing, with that.
Alan, I am so with you on that. I do that all the time. I have become very dependent upon,
quickly,
it's
it
fast.
like
And
sucked
not
me
only
in.
that, I don't have, if there's stuff that I need to research, it'll do that for me. So it's all it's like I
Yeah.
say, I'm lazy. I want things handed to me. I'm just like most people, and I have become super dependent upon it for doing a proposal, writing something for a paragraph or a talk that I'm submitting. But I don't always use it verbatim, but I will read it first, and then I'll take the thoughts and the structure of it and make it my own. And it's so much easier. It saves me so much time.
Absolutely.
I am a big fan. I totally rely on it now.
All right, I'm going to launch an AI detox center. You realize we'll all be invited in a few other.
12-step AI program.
But
You
I
know?
mean, that's always been kind of the goal, though, right? To use it to make our lives better and easier. I mean, I use it to help me proofread my proofreading. And Grammarly is a great tool that I use every day. I do my editing pass, and then I let that run. And let me tell you, it picks up, you missed a comma here, or there's an extra space, or, somebody spelled this wrong and you didn't catch it. And it makes my job easier. It makes the quality of the content that we're putting out that much better. And so, yeah, maybe I'm a little dependent on it, but I think, I'm also not just letting it run through and do my job for me, because that's not
yet.
the balance that we're trying to get to. But
I
don't know.
will tell you the one upside I really do appreciate. There's a lot of folks out there who are not gifted writers, shall we say, but they have a good idea and they have a notion and they have a thing that they want to share. And now they have a mechanism to do that in a way that the rest of us can comprehend, because in the past they might have written something that was indecipherable, and the idea would have been lost. So in that sense, it will the community of ideas will benefit immensely.
Agreed.
Mm-hmm.
AI is crack. Prove me wrong. All right. Hey, that's going to wrap
How
our
much it costs.
Yeah, no matter what it costs. Exactly. I want that next hit. All right. I think that's going to wrap up our Techstrong gang here for Monday. We are in Paris. Stay tuned. I think starting Wednesday, we'll be streaming Paris time. I think 10 in the morning till about 4 or 5 in the afternoon Paris time, and then we'll repeat it, which should be prime time for those of you over in the U.S. We'll try to keep you up to date on everything going on at KubeCon, Cloud Native Con, as well as everything else going on in the tech world. We'll be trying our best to follow that, including today, where we'll have the rest of our Techstrong TV schedule right after this. You've been watching Techstrong Gang. Thanks, gang. Hey, everyone. I really hoped you enjoyed Techstrong Gang this morning. It was another charged discussion around AI, sending lawyers AI and money. And all the usual personalities are joining around there, but do check it out if you missed it. But now let's get on with the rest of our Techstrong TV lineup for today. Next up is an interview I did actually with Mackenzie Jackson, who's the developer advocate at GitGuardian. And we're talking with Mackenzie around the State of Secrets Sprawl report. This study, they've been doing it for a couple of years now. It's the most comprehensive research on exposed secrets in GitHub, in public GitHub. And, secrets and secret sprawl is a real problem out there. Here's my interview with Mackenzie Jackson.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back here to Techstrong TV. Next up, we have a report from GitGuardian about the State of Secrets sprawl. And we're joined by Mackenzie Jackson, who's developer advocate over at GitGuardian. Hey, Mackenzie, welcome to Techstrong TV.
Hey, Alan, so it's great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. Mackenzie, before we jump into this report, though, let's talk a little bit about you. Developer advocate is, look, it's not 10 years ago, 7 years ago, maybe we didn't have those kinds of roles, right?
It's very new.
But in today's world, it's not unusual. But let's hear a little bit about your journey to becoming a developer advocate at GitGuardian.
Yeah. It's I'll try and give you the condensed version of the co-founder and CTO of a previous startup in healthcare called Compago, which is still exists today, headquartered in Australia. But there comes a point where a company grows so large, you need to make a decision. Do you hire a real CTO or do you keep pretending? And I found this role in developer advocacy where I get to work with research teams and kind of nerd out, which is exactly what I wanted to do, and get to share in that research and in all the great stuff in security that's going on around the world. So that's kind of how I ended up at GitGuardian at this point.
Excellent. And for those of the people in our audience, Mackenzie, who maybe aren't familiar with GitGuardian, how would you describe the company to them?
Yeah, we're a code security platform, and basically everything that we do is about helping developers, companies, and organizations write secure software. So we started off detecting what we call secrets, so credentials, API keys, things like that inside source code. We've now expanded that into lots of different areas. And to become a kind of complete code security platform. But everything that we do, we live and breathe security, and we're all about trying to make security as easy as possible and put it in the developer's life cycle, so that we become less of the people with the sticks and more of the people that can help build secure software.
Yep. And with a name like GitGuardian, I'm assuming, Git providing security within Git, sort of in a GitOps type of framework is important to the mission here, or not really?
Yeah, no, exactly. And I mean, for those that, are in the world of tech, probably all familiar with what Git is. It's kind of like the central meeting place of everything, where all the developers come to work. It's where pipelines spin off from. So everything that between GitOps, DevOps, and DevSecOps and development all kind of centralizes in your Git repositories. So, that was kind of the obvious place for us to start. Now, of course, the company's older than what it was. It's been around for many years now. So we do more than just security around Git, but that's still central to our core as at securing software.
Got it. So let's talk a little. Actually, before we do, for people who want more information on Git Guardian, before I forget, is it gitguardian.com.io?
Gitguardian.com. Yeah.
Perfect. All right, Mackenzie, let's jump in here now to this. It's the 2024 edition of the State of Secret Sprawl Report. Being that it's the 2024 edition, I'm assuming there's been previous editions. Why don't you give us a little bit of the history and scope of this report, and then we'll jump into like this year's edition of it.
Yeah, I'd love to. GitGuardian started as a company, almost as a side project with our founders, scanning basically the largest data set of source code there is, and that's public repositories on GitHub. And what they ended up finding was so many credentials that a whole business, and today quite a large business, was born from that. But one of the things that we do is, it started off as a bit of a research project, and we've continued that research project every single year. And basically, one of the things that we do is we scan all public activity that happens on GitHub, and we look for secrets, things like API key security certificates. And every single year, this is the 4th edition that we've done, and every single year we publish our findings in it. The first year that we did, we found a little about over 3 million secrets. The next report, we found 6 million, 10 million was last year. And this year, we've continued the upward trend. We've found 12.7 million secrets, so credentials that were publicly pushed on GitHub. So that's a little bit about the history of the State of Secret Sprawl report that we release.
Yep. Let's talk about the nexus of like secrets to the Git Guardian mission. Right? Why is this real important to you guys?
Yeah. So when you look at all the breaches that happen, you can just take any headline. The latest one in the headlines is a breach that's happening at Microsoft. Nearly all of them leverage secrets at some point. The attackers leverage secrets at some point, whether it's they've made initial access into systems through secrets, whether that's how they've kind of elevated the privileges or moved laterally. But secrets, are really fundamental to attackers in being able to break into things. And the reason is that we're still not very good at protecting these secrets. The reason is when we look at modern applications, it's built up of all these different building blocks. It's no longer a monolith. And all of these different building blocks, whether it be SaaS services, whether it be managed systems, whether it be cloud infrastructure, all leverage secrets to be able to talk to each other, talk to your application, talk to your data. And because of that, a lot of people need to handle these secrets, like developers, DevOps, your security personnel. And this makes them really hard to secure and means that it's really hard for them to kind of stay centralized. So they end up sprawling. And attackers know this. So the first thing that an attacker does when they break into anything is try and find secrets, persist their access. And what we're focused on is taking, the places that attackers look for this, scanning them, and then alerting people to where there are secrets. So, there's a lot of very sophisticated attacks that come out there and all these different chains and supply chain security. But when you get down to the core of it, often the root causes of a lot of these breaches, or at least what kind of makes them bad, is something simple like a password, an API key that was leaked in source code, in an email, in a Slack message, somewhere like that. So, that's why we've always been just obsessed with finding these secrets, because it's a very actionable attack path, and we can take that tool away from attackers really, really well with the correct tooling.
Agreed. All right. So the 2024 edition, as you said, we set a new high watermark for the amount of secrets that were kind of publicly accessible, scanning GitHub. What other, what are the kind of, beyond that, what are the key sort of, or the big headline, summary points of this?
Yeah, there's one that really surprised everyone. We add data points every time we release this report. And one of the data points that we added here is, when we find secrets, not only do we detect them, but we also check where it's possible if they're valid. So, hey, have you leaked, a Google Cloud key? Yes, and is that key still valid? So, we've been doing this for a long time, but one of the things we added into the report this year is we decided to check, hey, after we've found a secret, after we've alerted the person to that secret, how long does it remain active for? And we were quite shocked because even with us reporting on it, over 90% of the secrets remained active after 5 days. So we kind of slowed down checking on the secrets after 5 days. But, that's an incredibly long amount of time. And we also saw things like people would delete the data. So delete the repository if they've leaked a source code and they've leaked in source code. They delete that repository, but they don't revoke the secret. And the secret's already been out there. It's already awash in public spaces. It's already backed up onto many different services. So, the fact that so many of these secrets were not just leaked, but also remained valid after 5 days, over 90%. That number this year was really, really shocking to us. Yeah, and another number that kind of shocks me is the amount of different developers that leak this secret. I think everyone probably understands that, pushing a password somewhere public's bad, right? We all get that. So how often and who actually does it? We have this idea that it would only be, an idiot that would do that. But actually what we find is that 1 in 10 commit authors, so that boils down to basically 1 in 10 developers leak a secret every year. So, you've got a company with 100 people, even if there are 100 of the smartest people, 10 of them are still probably going to leak a secret just because it's so easy to do. So that number also jumps out at me with the report to say, hey, this isn't just a problem of a couple of students making mistakes. This is a systemic problem in our entire industry. And a lot of that comes down to the mechanisms of Git that we won't go into, but, it is a big problem. So there's a couple of things that really jump out to me beyond the 12.7 million, the big numbers are always great, but these things really kind of add context to that.
But what's really I find interesting is secrets management is, it's not an old sector of security or an old segment, but it's a somewhat mature segment, right? With multiple players. Why aren't we doing a better job, or we're doing a better job, but it's just such a big problem?
I think it's a little bit of everything. It's one of the issues with this problem and why it's so, dumbfounding sometimes is that secret sprawl should be a solved problem based on the technology that we have, right? We have amazing secret management solutions out there. We have great secret detection management solutions out there. We can send secrets securely. Every single technology has a way to handle these secrets securely. So, why on earth is this still happening? And it just comes down to the pressure and speed of which we develop things, and also just people not understanding, how sensitive these are. And, some of the simple solutions is, when you're a developer and you're working on a feature, let's say you need to connect to some kind of data set. One of the first things you do, someone gives you an API key so that you can test it, right? You may save that key on your computer so you could access it later because it's a pain to get them through the management system. And maybe the first thing you do is you hard code that in. You're going to delete it later, but Git and version control is very unforgiving, that once we do something once, then if you know what to do, you can go back in the history and find that, right? A record of everything you do is kind of maintained in Git. So even though these secrets are kind of non-visible to humans, you can look through a source code repository and not find anything. But if you go take a step back through the history, you will. And it's these types of reasons why, it's not the fact that we're storing secrets unsecurely, although sometimes, people are, but it's more the fact that once they get let out of their cage, it's a high value asset that's easily duplicatable, and everything has backups now, right? Your Git is probably backed up in different services. You may copy source code on through messaging systems. It may be on your computer. You may store it in your network, maybe even on your personal work repositories or all of these different things. So it's just such a hard problem to solve because, they just kind of run wild once they get out of their cage. And it's just really hard to do. And, it's one of those things that you have to be perfect at it every single time, because if you fail once, then these secrets are going to end up everywhere.
Absolutely. Hey, Mackenzie, we're over our 15 minutes, but for people who want to maybe download the report and check it out for themselves, where can they go?
Yeah, so on our website, on gitguardian.com, and you will find all kinds of flashing banners there to download the State of Secret Sprawl. It's ungated, so you don't even need to share your email with us. Or you can just Google the State of Secret Sprawl, and you will find it very, very easily. If we've done our job, you won't have to look very far to find this report. But gitguardian.com is the best place to kind of see that, and also see other research that we've done.
Very cool. Hey, thanks for coming on and keeping us posted on this new edition of the State of Secret Sprawl report. And we'll speak to you soon.
Excellent. Thanks for having me.
All right. Mackenzie Jackson, developer advocate here from GitGuardian on Techstrong. We'll take a break. We'll be back in a minute. Next up on Techstrong TV is an Security Boulevard Chats podcast episode in which me and my co-host, Mitch Ashley, delve into the profound impact that AI is having on cybersecurity. And, there's two sides of the coin. It could both help us as well as hurt us. We're going to take a deeper dive here into the murky waters of deep fakes and AI-generated misinformation.
Hey everybody, this is Mitch Ashley.
And Alan Schimmel.
And you're listening to
Security Boulevard Chat.
Yeah, baby.
All right, Mitchell, now it seems like a well-oiled machine.
We're getting this down,
Yeah, man.
Can learn new tricks.
Yeah. Well, I think it's old dogs just relearning old tricks.
Oh, that's true. Remembering tricks.
But it's like the land of 51st dates. It's like every day's a new day.
Every day's a new day. Groundhog Day.
Yep. We learned it again. Anyway, so Mitch, as usual, a busy week in security. We've got our requisite reaches happening in the tech world, our requisite security companies either doing layoffs. A lot of good friends at Cisco.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of talented folks at Cisco got laid off in the last week. Some of the public companies have lowered their guidance in terms of revenue. That's a tough time, but there's also excitement building with RSA this year, just a few months out. For those who don't know, at our annual DevSecOps event at RSA seminar, I think is the official word. It's an all-day event within RSA at Moscone Center, and it's on the Monday of RSA week, which this year's Monday, May 6th. We're going to be focusing in on, DevSecOps in the world of generative AI.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got some amazing speakers, right? David Brin, acclaimed, multiple Hugo Nebula award-winning sci-fi author, PhD, NASA JPL fellow there. Also one of the, preeminent futurists for the last 30, 35 years in the world. Mm-hmm. Then we have, CISOs and senior security people from OpenAI, DeepMind, Google, Meta, Anthropic, more. And of course you have a panel going on. Mm-hmm. But I think, what we may lose sight of in the bright lights of all that is the very real question of inherently, what's the relationship between security and AI here?
I think
Right?
we're
Is it
trying to
is it
figure out.
a help? Yeah. Is it a help? Is it a foe? Is it both? Is it everything to everyone all at once? I don't know. What do you think, Mitch?
It seems like there's sort of two or three different threads. One is attackers and what they're going to do with AI. How does that aid them? And then the response is what in AI can help us both thwart that or prevent that, as well as other general security attacks. I think the second thread is automation, right? What can we do to help improve the SOC? What can we do to help improve incident response? Whether it's information that can be surfaced through generative AI or machine learning and other things in AI that might help us with, we've got all this data, all this traffic, all these attacks, what can we learn from all of that? And then I think the third one is sort of that biggest unknown is like, well, what aren't we thinking of that AI might be able to help us with that we're sort of, current paradigms don't set us up to think initially about that are really innovative and kind of move the ball forward. Because I mean, you've heard me say before, security is kind of a funny thing that we're still doing the stuff you and I did 23, 4, 5 years ago. Those things are still there, and that the pace of innovation has happened. But I don't know. My sense is always like we could be doing a lot more. How do we help that get done faster?
Yeah.
Maybe AI is part of helping that accelerate.
I think it will be and it should be. I'm a binary kind of person. I don't know if that really.
Are you a binary star?
Yeah, or non-binary. I forget the whole. I always get confused. But anyway, the way I look at it, Mitch, is I look at AI through two lenses. One is, how can I use AI to help me make better security, for lack of a better phrase, to make the security better, right? AI is a tool I could use, and there are some obvious applications of it that will allow me to do more faster, better, cheaper, more efficiently. The evil twin of that is, what do I need to do to secure against AI? So AI in the wrong hands or AI pointed in the wrong direction, right? And what, that's part of my job now. If I'm a security person, that's part of my job. How do I defend against AI generated attacks or AI aided attacks, enhanced attacks? And that's really scary because you know what? These bad guys have just as good, if not better, an imagination than the good guys do. And many times they have just as big a infrastructure and,
they're also more
resources.
directly financially motivated, right? Than maybe a day-to-day security engineer who's doing this for, their passion or their belief in security.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, they're incentivized. The more they do, the more they make. So when I look at AI, it's, unfortunately, I think the answer is AI is going to do a little or a lot of both of those things. But I'd like it to do more to help than to hurt. I think eventually it certainly will, but there's going to be some AI and aided attacks. Excuse me. I think we already see it with phishing.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? The level of phishing has gotten much better. I look forward to see what software and services I paid for every day when I get these emails for the receipt, for Norton or or any other of these kind of things, the Best Buy Geek Squads, and I get at least one or two of those a day. And where they used to be they were so bad they were funny. Now it takes me time. I go and I look at who the email is from. I look in the header to see the email, just to make sure it's really not from who it purports to be. Usually PayPal or something. So I look, and I think unfortunately we're a lot closer to the beginning of this dilemma, or maybe not dilemma, to the beginning of this era than we are to the end of it.
Yeah,
So
I keep thinking there's low-hanging fruit things that we can do. Like, one of those, I have the this bugs me list. It's not very long, but a few things that I see, like, so if on a web page it can validate your email address, that it's a valid email address as you're typing it before you submit the form and all that kind of stuff. Why can't your email client validate the links in the emails that you're seeing so that they're really going to the Best Buy site and they're not some wonky thing? That seems like pretty low-hanging fruit. Should be a great application of AI. Maybe you don't even need AI to do that, but there are those kind of things. I think, to your point about being at the beginning of this, I think we're already seeing, but we're really heading into this big area of questioning everything, right? Is that a deep fake? Is that not just an email, but is that a deep fake video? Is that a call from Alan? Voice message is a text. All of this stuff, I think, is going to teach us to question everything. The problem is, will it also teach us not to trust anything? Are we going to end up in this era where we don't believe anything because we just have no way of validating it? And that I think is one of the kind of bigger dangers about security and AI. Thinking about security engineers, how do we know I'm reacting on the right information? Right? I
agree. Look, this is, I think, a society-wide problem. And I think a lot of people, they look at the stuff that passes itself off as news today. I think there's some element of people who just believe it because it reinforces their worldview.
Yep.
But I think there's a bigger group of people who don't believe anything because they think it's all nonsense. And that reinforces their worldview too, I guess. And then there's probably a small minority who say, I'm going to validate it before I believe it or not. And they dig in a little bit. But most people aren't doing that. And it's, I think, a big problem in the world.
I think it's tough to ask everybody to do that. Not everybody is inclined to, take the time more or less, kind of really dig into it and say, maybe I don't want to do that.
Agreed. Excuse me, Mitch. Agreed. I wanted to bring up another topic today, though. We're going to be doing a video interview today on Security Boulevard Chat. And this is, I think it's the first time, since we relaunched this year, the podcast, where we have a guest on. And it look, I'm not fooling anyone. It's not a live guest that we had joining Mitchell and I when we made this. It's actually an interview I did with Chris Ang from Veracode this past week for Techstrong TV. And Mitch, Chris. We know Chris Ang.
Long time.
20-something years, man. Yeah, Chris is the VP of Threat Research, but he's been at Veracode through all of its incarnations. I think he might have been an At Stake guy even before Veracode. But, At Stake, if you remember, was acquired by Symantec, and then they kind of spun out, or the Chris is left there with some other folks and started Veracode. It was a long time ago, for sure. Chris Darby was the CEO there, and of course, Chris has gone on to amazing things. Anyway, I had a chance to catch up with Chris. Every year Veracode does their State of Software Security, SOSS. And what they do is, it's not a survey, it's not interviewing, but they take all of the data that they see or pass through, anonymized, obviously, to protect the innocent. And they draw trends out of it, and they don't even do it. Here's an interesting thing I was reminded of in talking to Chris. They actually deploy a data scientist firm. I want to say Cytera or something like that. Chris mentions the name in the interview. This is a data science firm that specializes in cyber. And so they're the ones who are really kind of crunching the numbers and coming up with the trends that make their way onto the front pages of this report. This year's report, like, the biggest thing that they saw was security debt. And, and I spoke about this with Chris. It's actually ironic that I was the one interviewing him with this, because so much of in the early DevOps days was about technical debt.
Technical debt. It's all we
Right?
heard.
How much?
Yeah.
Yep. I mean, how much technical debt do most organizations who have been doing waterfall or have been kicking the can down the road accumulated to the point where it was suffocating them, but it was so suffocating that they really almost didn't have an out without really biting the bullet with some catastrophic potential. And I guess I just never thought about it until Chris and this report came out. But it's the same thing with regard to security. It is a monster of a thing.
Absolutely. And there's also maybe a connection. I'm curious to see in this interview when we watch it, of some of that security debt comes from software debt, application debt, right? You're not updating this software. It's not, not able to keep pace with change and updating open source, vulnerabilities that might be in your own software applications and stuff. That also contributes to that security debt, as well as the workload and the backlog of security work that creates that debt.
Yep. Agreed. Anyway, Veracode in this state of software security has taken security debt as the star of this year's report. And they've drawn out some really good data there that gives you some really good insight. So if it's okay, let's run this video of the interview with Chris and we'll be right back. Hi, everyone. Welcome back here to Techstrong TV. I'm happy to have a good friend of mine back with us here to discuss the latest research from our friends at Veracode. He's Chris Eng. Chris is the Chief Research Officer at Veracode and has been for a long time. I know Chris probably longer than either of us want to admit. Chris, welcome back. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Good. It's good to have you here. So, Chris, I think most of our audience is very familiar with Veracode. They're one of the pioneers in the AppSec market. And, as I mentioned, you and I know each other back, I think, from the at-stake days through all the various iterations of Veracode and corporate overlords and all that good stuff. But in case, I don't know, maybe someone out here is new or they don't know Veracode, how would you describe Veracode to them?
Yeah, we're a software security company and we're trying to, we help our customers with software security at every stage of the life cycle. So everything from the educational aspect for the developer through detecting and fixing issues as you're coding to doing static, dynamic, and software composition scanning as you're getting ready to deploy, penetration testing after that. So everything you can think of sort of in the SDLC, we've always talked about integrating security at every stage, right? And so we're all about doing that in an automated way at scale. And it's taken a long time to get there, but I think the industry is realizing that you can't just think about this later. You've got to integrate it at every possible stage.
I get it. Absolutely. And of course, you're being very modest, but, Veracode is not just a software security company. You guys have really helped set the trail, if you will, or cleared the trail or made the trail, especially around application security, AppSec, and stuff like that. And this is going back, I guess, has Veracode been around 20 years? Is that fair, Chris? Around that?
Not quite, but we're getting pretty close. It was 2006.
It's got to be. Yeah. Okay.
And
I was going to say 2005, something like that. It was
the whole motivation. For me coming over was like I was sitting there doing penetration tests for customers, one off, 2 weeks at a time, and that just doesn't scale. And so when you start thinking about what does scale, how do you take the increasing amount of software that's being written by every company out there and scale that into a real program with process and tooling around it where you can, test your software and make security testing, as ingrained as quality testing or all the other things that you have to do to produce software. The only way to do that was to bring automation to it. And the thing for us in 2006 was like, well, let's put it in the cloud. We didn't have that word yet, but so let's put it in the cloud and get out of this mentality where you've got to give people this software to install and maintain and have computers for, and let's just let them upload stuff and we'll handle that part of it. And that was what's really allowed a lot of big programs to scale over the years. And then we get a lot of great data out of that, which is kind of how we ended up writing this report.
Right, the byproduct of which is the State of Software Security report every year, right?
Right.
Like
you can kind of see
a lot of that data.
Yeah. You see what's happening, right, across different industries, different languages. Are things getting better or worse? Where are the concentrations of bad news and good news? And first 2010, we thought like, well, let's put something out there for the industry. The report had a data set of 1,500 applications, which we were like, wow, 1,500 applications, like that's huge. This year's report has 1 million. So
just a little bit different, a little bit different, more scale.
And you can learn so much by just like number crunching that data and, starting to ask some probing questions of like what's happening out there. Of course, we do that hand in hand with our friends over at Scientia, who have the data science, security data science background to be able to really to dig into some of the complicated things that we want to do. So it's been a really cool journey, getting to do this every year and having, like I said, an increasing amount of like really rich application security data every year.
No doubt about it. Chris, before we dive into some of the nuggets from this year, the report is available now. If people go to veracode.com, they could download the report.
Yeah. Veracode.com/SOSS, which stands for State of Software Security. I mean, you can get there from the front page also, but yeah, they can read it. We released it actually just a few days ago.
Fantastic.
Fresh off the presses.
All right. So, Chris, let's start with, what are the big insights from this year's report? So
this year, what we chose to focus on was security debt. And you're hearing a lot about security debt lately, I think, in conversations, just in terms of what's piling up, and how difficult is it to kind of get on top of that. Security debt as a concept, I think I always like to compare it to credit card debt or any sort of financial debt, right? Where if you accrue it and you don't pay it down, it gets more expensive to fix later, right? In finance world, it's interest. In software world, it's sort of the complexity of software and the crusty old code and things like that. And technically, I think any flaw or vulnerability that you know about in your software that you choose not to fix once you know about it, that becomes security debt, right? You've decided to defer it. For the purposes of this report, because we're doing calculations and whatnot, we're defining security debt as anything that you know about and haven't fixed for at least a year. So that's that's an ample amount of time, right? So it's kind of fair to say you've let it slide into debt at that time. And so what we find is security debt is all over the place. It's endemic. It affects every application, every industry, every language, size of application, size of company, doesn't really matter. And you just kind of find it everywhere. And you find that 71% of organizations have security debt. About 45, close to half of organizations have what we call critical security debt, which is flaws and vulnerabilities that are of a high or critical severity that you've let slide past that time. So it's pretty bad. Companies are letting this pile up, and over time that really, really accumulates.
Sure. To me, security debt is like dark matter, right? It may make up 80% of the universe, but we can't see it, smell it, touch it. But we see its presence based upon its gravitational pull, right, on regular matter or whatever. So, in my mind, security debt has a similar kind of thing. Because it's there, we may choose to ignore it, and many organizations kind of bury their head in the sand around it. but nevertheless, the gravitational pull of it prevents us or slows us down from doing things that we know we need to do. Right. And I think in the case of security debt, it's almost sort of a ticking time bomb too, though, because sooner or later those chickens come home to roost, as the saying goes, right? And someone's got to pay the price.
That's exactly right. Nobody, like, most people would rather go and write a cool new feature, right, than go and fix some security issues. And on a day-to-day basis, you don't feel the security debt there unless you've got, a security team pounding at your door or something. But, you really feel it when there ends up being a large industry impacting event, like, like a Heartbleed or a Log4j or something along those lines. And that's where the security debt really comes back to bite you, because if you've allowed yourself to kind of get that far out of whack, like with an open source library, for example, if I'm up to date, if I'm only, a month out of date and some big vulnerability comes out, it's actually very quick for me to just go patch that with the fixed code. Nothing's going to break. It's a really easy fix. If I'm 5 years out of date, imagine I can't just jump to the latest version, right? I have to kind of go step by step, go from 5 years out of date to 4 years out of date, take the next major version, make sure that nothing broke as a result, because I'm making such big changes to the code. When you can make small changes at a more frequent basis, you lower the chance that you're going to break anything. And that applies to pretty much any security fix that you're going to make. I think the longer that you let it go, and also if it's current, if it's recent in your memory, if you just fix it when you find out about it, you're already working on that code, right? As a developer, you don't have to go unearth it from some branch from a year ago and figure out what was I doing at that time, and what does this code actually do, and kind of get back into that mindset. You're already working on it, but it's a muscle, right?
Yeah, and it's muscle memory. I so started doing DevOps.com about 10 years ago, right? And look, the whole technical debt thing was a big issue that DevOps was helping to address, right? Is a lot of organizations just kind of kick the can down the road.
Yeah.
And like you said, eventually it becomes such a big hurdle to get up to speed, to get up to par, that you just can't do it in one fell swoop. Now it takes time and more effort. And it's not that any one little thing is fatal. It's the totality of it, right?
Yeah.
That really weighs in. As I said, it's like dark matter. It starts morphing and pulling at the fabric of your stuff. So what's the answer here, though?
Yeah, there are some things that can be done. And one of the areas that we spent a little time investigating, once we kind of looked at the nature of the debt and the volume of the debt, is what are application teams actually, what kind of effort are they actually putting against this? And so if you think about, for example, what's my average monthly fix rate? Like if I have 100 flaws in any given month, how many of those flaws am I actually fixing within that time frame? Like, what is my capacity as a team? And so we've defined capacity in that way. What percentage of the known vulnerabilities you have are you actually getting after month over month? Obviously, you want to be fixing faster than you're creating them. Otherwise, you get into more debt. But what you find is that most teams are not dedicating a lot of capacity to this. About 2/3 of them are dedicating like 3% capacity. I think if there's a chart in the report that kind of shows what that looks like. But it's like we're talking single digit percentages a lot of the times. And so, okay, that's, not ideal from a security perspective, but you're balancing a lot of things, right? You're balancing new features, you're balancing non-functional requirements, other tech debt, right? You're keeping your stack up to date, all these other things that you have to do as a software developer. So let's just say that your capacity is what it is. Let's say you can't change that, even though that you can, but it's a business decision and it's a lot more complicated than that. So given the past capacity that you do have, are you as a team using that capacity in the best possible, most efficient way, right? Am I getting after the highest risk items, knocking those off at least? And it turns out that largely they are not. Teams are not. So you would expect that you'd work on the most critical issues first. And once you kind of got through all those, you'd work on the medium severities and the lows. But when you look at a plot of the sort of the lifetime of those types of issues, you find that they're all being addressed at roughly the same rate. You see, there's a chart that has these lines and they overlap because there does not seem to be a prioritization there. And so that's one thing that's actually really easy to get after is prioritize the security work a little bit better. Because if you have only got a certain amount of time to work with, you really should be spending on the things that present the most risk to the business, not what you just feel like working on. And we can't really tell why it is that developers are choosing to fix the lower severity items first sometimes. I think a lot of it just has to do with convenience. I'll fix what's in front of me right now because it's there, which, hard to fault that, or I'm going to fix this because it's the most recent thing that popped up in a scan. And so it's fresh and I'm just going to go after that one. But in order to really get after this from a security perspective, you've got to kind of level it up a little bit and be thinking about how does the overall bucket of flaws that I know about affect the risk posture and go at it in a more prioritized fashion. The other thing you can do other than increasing capacity is just getting better at fixing the flaws themselves, right? For example, if I can learn how to fix a SQL injection problem in 5 minutes instead of 30 minutes, I'm just making those numbers up. It takes a little longer probably, but then I've effectively increased my capacity because now I can tackle 6 times more in the same amount of time. And so getting better, whether that's through education, whether that's through sort of generative AI assisted type fixing, any ways that we can make ourselves better at the task at hand, effectively increases our capacity and allows us to chip away at more of the debt. So those are some things that teams can do.
Absolutely. Like any debt, whether it's credit card debt, technical debt, or security debt, kicking the can down the road is just never a great solution. And, it's easy for me to say, and, but when people find themselves in this state, it's kind of usually too late for that, but you got to start somewhere. And, there's no better day than today. Chris, beyond technical debt, beyond security debt, what other kind of big, highlights from the report this year?
That is the bulk of it because it's such a big problem, and we slice the data a lot of different ways, and kind of look at what's happening and the factors that affect that. We do have another section, a section at the end of the report that kind of follows on some open source research that we did last time. We started looking at what was on GitHub and some of the characteristics that we thought might, lead to more risk. For example, this was last time, so we looked at repositories and how often they were updated, or how many developers were on them, those types of things. And we pushed a little bit more into that direction this year, asking questions like, how much risk do you get out of using open source when there's only a single developer? Or like, if you look at the percentage of applications in a particular language that are using code from a single developer, right? There's a lot of libraries out there that are very popular that have one maintainer. And so what does that risk look like when you think about that in terms of the organization. If they introduce a bug, if their account is taken over, if they decide to disband the project, like those types of things. And then we looked at OpenSSF, which I'm sure you probably come across at some point, but just sort of industry work to kind of do many things, but they have this notion of a score that they put on open source libraries that looks at a number of different factors to gauge sort of how secure that library is. And it's more about practices than vulnerability counting, right? It's, are they using, are there signs of dangerous coding patterns? Do they use branch protection? Do they use code reviews? Do they use SAS scans? All these things that kind of almost like a maturity model type thing, right? And so we looked at the scores of open source libraries that they've assigned scores to, and then we've looked at open source libraries that we see actually in use in real world applications from our customer base. And we actually saw that the libraries that we saw in use tended to have on the higher side of OpenSSF scores. Now, I'm not saying that people are using the OpenSSF score to decide what they want to use, but there does seem to be a correlation there that people are leaning towards the libraries that have better practices. And so that's sort of a good sign. There's a lot of data there, right? But we wanted to kind of see what that was looking like. So there's a whole section there on open source, what that looks like in the ecosystem, how, the influence that individual developers have and stuff like that. So worth the read. But our focus was really, let's get into this security debt discussion that nobody wants to have, and let's have it. And honestly, I saw Ollie Whitehouse over at the UK. I'm forgetting the acronym now, right? But it's their CISA basically. And he was saying like one of the top priorities for the year, as he's concerned, is like getting the security debt conversation happening and figure out ways to get after that, because it's just this looming problem that comes back to bite us every time something big happens in the industry. So it's a conversation that needs to happen.
Yep. I think it's a topic that we are going to see throughout the year. I hope to see some of it maybe at RSA, where I usually see you.
I usually see you, yeah.
Hopefully we'll see you there. Again, for folks who want to download the report, you could go to vericode.com/SOSS and get it right from there, or just at vericode.com. I'm sure there'll be links off the front page.
You'll find it.
Yep. Hey, Chris, as always, thanks for coming on and talking it up and informing us, enlightening us. Best of luck, and come back. Well, if I don't talk to you before, I'll see you in May, but maybe before.
That sounds great. Thanks for the chat. Always a good conversation.
All right. Chris Yang, Chief Research Officer at Vericode here on Techstrong TV. Tell you one thing. Mitchell, I have less hair than I did 20 years ago. Yours is much more gray. But even Chris Yang has gone gray on us.
Yeah.
It makes you realize, Mitch, here's to us and those like us. Damn few left.
Yeah. But we're hanging on.
But Chris is definitely one of them. And look, he does a great job there at Vericode, as does Chris Weisfeld. I mean, it's still a great company.
And a lot of people follow that. I mean, that report's important.
I mean, look, they've been setting the mark in the AppSec for, I think, as long as there's been an AppSec.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
So, and I'm lucky. I mean, whenever they have some kind of news like that, Chris, I guess, tells the PR people or whatever to reach out to me. And him and I get together to discuss it. So I probably interview Chris 3 or 4 times a year, and I usually see him at RSA or Black Hat. Yep. And as a matter of fact, we made plans. We'll see him at RSA again this year. Good stuff.
He's talking about real things, real data, right? And the analysis from it. So it's not just pontificating about what we think's happening.
No. I mean, the thing about Chris Yang is this is a real deal security guy who's now been doing the research at Vericode for a very long time. And so it's not your average analyst, right, who is riding that gravy train. No disrespect, Mitchell.
Hey, none taken.
All right.
I try not to do it. Yes.
he's a real security guy. So really, really, really happy with that.
Well, this has been
Anyway.
great. I appreciate you bringing that interview forward so folks could listen and
Yeah,
watch.
no, and if you want to see it again, it's available on Techstrong TV, as is Mitchell. These podcasts, if you're listening to it on Apple or watching it or on Spotify or wherever, you can catch it there. You can also catch it on our Techstrong TV YouTube channel, as well as on Techstrong.tv as well. So there's no lack of outlets to watch your favorite podcasts here on Techstrong.
Every part of our global takeover plan.
Omniversal. Anyway, Mitchell, thanks for having me on Security Boulevard Chats and joining me this week. We'll be back next week with more.
Yep, and you've been listening to
Security Boulevard Chats.
Join us next time.
Bye-bye.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
Next on Techstrong TV is our Echo Insights editor and host, Bonnie Schneider. And Bonnie interviews Asim Hussain, Executive Director of the Green Software Foundation, about their upcoming event, Carbon Hack 24 Hackathon, and the launch of their groundbreaking open source software measurement tool, Impact Framework. It's a great interview with Bonnie and Asim Hussain. Check it out.
This is Techstrong TV.
Welcome to Techstrong TV. I'm Bonnie Schneider, and today I'm pleased to be joined by Asim Hussain, Executive Director of the Green Software Foundation. Asim, it's great to have you here.
It's wonderful to be here again, Bonnie.
Well, Asim, I'd like for you to share for people that are unfamiliar with the term green software. What is it? And also, what led you to this new position at the Green Software Foundation?
Sure. So green software, as we define it, is software that is carbon efficient. So everything we do emits carbon into the atmosphere, including software. And what we say is for every unit of value or usability that a piece of software gives you, it should really be emitting the least amount of carbon possible. And that's what we call carbon efficiency. And there's actually 3 ways we say that you can be carbon efficient as software, and that is to be energy efficient, use the least amount of energy possible, hardware efficient, which is use the least amount of hardware possible. And the third one is carbon aware computing, which is use electricity when it's the greenest, use more electricity that's green than dirty electricity. That's called carbon aware computing. What led me to the Green Software Foundation? Well, I've been looking at the space of, the intersection of sustainability and software about 5 years now. And about 3 years ago, I've been writing, I've been talking, other organizations have started to write and talk about it, and we all just kind of came together and we realized that actually we should all be collaborating in this space rather than perhaps not necessarily competing, but working independently. And so we formed the Green Software Foundation. It's actually a foundation governed or we have the guidance of the Linux Foundation above us. We have a lot of structure here, and we work on open standards, open source, community events and teaching and training, and also kind of policy and work in that space as well. I was working at Microsoft. I used to work at Intel. I used to work at various organizations. And I'm very glad to say about a few months ago, I managed to transition full-time as the executive director of the Green Software Foundation. So that's been a wonderful transition for me. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to accelerating green software in this space moving forward.
Well, congratulations. That is a terrific opportunity there. And speaking of opportunities, I understand that you have a big event coming up that involves carbon hacking. It's called Carbon Hack 24 Hackathon. Can you tell us all about that?
Yeah, so we ran our first hackathon in 2022, and it was very, very successful. So now we're running another one in 2024. Hackathon is just a friendly competition with developers all over the world. And the theme for this year is software measurement, because that's actually a big theme for green software in general. And so we built a piece of technology called Impact Framework, which helps people measure and verify and audit, the emissions of software. And so this year's hackathon is all about measuring using the Impact Framework. Last time it was very much kind of developer focused, and this time we've even got contributions from non-technical developers. If you're somebody who's good at writing or explaining or writing case studies, there's even prizes for you there as well. Yeah.
That does sound exciting. When is this event going to take place?
It's going to take place, it starts off next week and it runs for about 3 weeks. So it finishes on April the 8th. If you want to go to it, it's grunsoft, grnsft.org/hack.
Okay.
That's the website to go to it. Oh, we have prizes. We have a number of wonderful sponsors. And we've got a prize of 40,000, I think, is the prize fund right now. We've got sponsors from Accenture, Amadeus, Aviva, BCGX, Century Software, Infocom Media Development Authority in Singapore, Nedbank South Africa, Entity Data. We've got like a lot of really great sponsors who are all just also really, because like who's sponsoring this space? These are the organizations that are really interested in software measurement, and the judges are the ones going, I really want to see what people solve in this space, because we've got this problem, and what are people going to build, because we need to improve our software measurement. So yeah, everybody's really excited about it, including me.
That is, and it's kind of perfect timing. One of the things, I know you're based in the EU and I'm in the US, and we had some big news that came out recently from the SEC, finalizing their rules for carbon disclosure for public companies. And it seems to be part of a greater movement happening globally, where we're seeing more governments bringing attention to this issue, and seeing what companies can do to be more transparent with their emissions. So how do you see this influence on the Green Software Foundation going forward?
Yeah, so we get asked about this a lot. And in fact, kind of the policy working group is working on a policy manual, because there is so much, because as well as the SEC one, there's EU rulings as well for carbon disclosure for much smaller organizations, various other regulations that are coming through the pipeline. There's an AI regulation as well that's being proposed in the US. So there's a lot of people know there's regulation coming down. Right now, they're asking questions. What do we need to do? What can we do now that actually meets the guidance in that regulation? I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done to actually flesh things out and provide that guidance. Because when you look at these regulations, they're great. They provide direction, but you don't have to scratch the surface too much before you're like, what do you need me to do to reveal these missions? So that's, I think, something that needs to be figured out moving forward. I really love the word that you used though just then, which was transparency. And that's a word that I use a lot these days as well, because I think the real key to a lot of this is actually transparency. When we hear, one of the things I say is like, if you're being fully transparent, you can't be accused of greenwashing. You can just be accused of having a different opinion or being wrong, but you can't be accused of greenwashing. So it's really important, I think, in the future to be much, much more transparent about this. That's one of the things what we're working on with the Impact Framework is, how do you actually write out your information in a way that is transparent, that somebody else could go, oh, I see what you use there. Oh, that's interesting. We wouldn't use that. Or for the SEC, they actually prefer these models and these assumptions. The EU prefers these models and these assumptions. Let's be fully transparent. What are we measuring? How are we measuring? What are the impacts of some of those assumptions? So I think transparency is really, really key in the future for meeting a lot of these regulations. Also understanding what that even means when you meet a regulation.
I agree. And I know that you mentioned Impact Framework, but I'd like to take a deeper dive into this, how it's a new open source software, a measurement tool. I think it's going to be in demand going forward based on what we were just discussing, but I'd love to hear more about the interest cases of that.
Yeah, so I think people see how excited about Impact Framework, and I think I've been on this cutting edge for like so many years now, that I really, truly do see more excitement about this thing than I've seen about other things that have then grown up to be even larger than they were. So there's a lot of interest in it. The big pain point that every organization has been feeling is measuring. But really, it's more than that. It's about how to understand the results, that measurement, because a lot of the time you spend all year and you calculate one total number, and then you pat yourself on your back and you meet yourself again, the team next year again, to do the same. But how do you turn that into actionable insights? What do you do? The only way to do that is to really break down that number into nitty-gritty. Exactly what does this process consume? What did that team do? Who is responsible inside your organization for the most emissions? And that's where you can target the effort, and you know where the investment needs to go. One of the things that I think has been a real revelation to me and to the whole team over the last 2 years, where we've been looking and investigating this space, is that we've all kind of historically been waiting for organizations and everybody to tell us what our emissions are. Tell me what my emissions are. Tell me what my emissions are. And it's really challenging for organizations to actually give you that number, because it's actually very hard to calculate it in a way that makes sense to you. So what we've seen happen in the open source ecosystem, at least, is people have started taking things that they can observe about their software. Like, I might not know what the emissions of my software is, but I know how many gigabytes I saved into that database. I know how much money I spent on that cloud bill. I know how many page views I had on my website. And they then have been building these models which take those things you can observe and convert them into impacts. And that's really the real kind of aha moment, was like, oh, let's do a lot more of that. And that's what Impact Framework does. If you can observe something about your system, it can then take the observation, turn it into an impact. And it really empowers everybody all of a sudden to measure all of their impacts, because you're not waiting anymore for somebody to release emissions data. You can calculate it yourself from stuff you can measure yourself. So it's really empowering a lot of people to measure emissions. And a lot of people are excited about it.
That's great. Well, the Green Software Foundation talks a lot about a trusted ecosystem in software development. Can you elaborate on what that is and how it can be implemented?
So I think this is, again, really important, because if you go back a couple of years, everybody was starting to talk about green software, but there was a lot of stuff out there, and organizations didn't really know, who should I go to? Where should what should I read? What advice should I take? What standards should I follow? And that kind of fractured ecosystem doesn't give you a lot of trust if you're like a C-suite inside an organization and you want to invest in something or do something. So what does creating a trusted ecosystem mean? Well, one of the ways that we've done it in the Green Software Foundation is just by working through consensus. We're now 60-member organizations. So if 60-member organizations can get together and agree on a standard, then you can trust that standard more than if it was just built with one organization with all the best of intent and release it themselves. So that's one way you build a trusted ecosystem, is through consensus. And also now we've kind of moved on a little bit. There's a lot of case studies. There's a lot more examples where large organizations, how they've applied some of these. How have they done it? This is how we did it. This is how we calculated our emissions, using open tooling, open standards, being very transparent about it. And that, again, builds that trust also. But I think we're very different now than we were 3 years ago. There is a bit more trust in the ecosystem now, and people do know more about where to go to. Yeah.
Well, in your experience, how do you view the reaction of people in terms of the challenges they're facing in implementing these changes, and what would you recommend people do to overcome them, especially people in IT departments, as our Techstrong audience is filled with people that work in IT?
Yeah, so the very first thing I would say is become knowledgeable on the space. So we actually have training on our website. It's very quick. It's learn.greensoftware.foundation. About 70,000 people have taken it now. And that helps you get the language so you can actually start communicating this internally. One of the things we added in the training, which we added in the latest iteration because we thought it was that important, was understanding climate commitments. So if your organization has actually made a climate commitment, there's different types of commitments. And then if you understand what that commitment is, you can then understand what you need to say to your leadership in order to move the needle on what their public commitment is. So if your company's made a public commitment, understand what that is. And then you can draw a line between what you're doing to that and then make some suggestions. And if your company hasn't made a public commitment, I would honestly say that is the very first step that you need to do. It's very hard to make any change inside an organization unless it's made a public commitment. And you can read the training. There's also great advice from other organizations as well. Climate Action Tech has some great advice. Then it's more of a grassroots internal employee effort to speak to leadership, talk to them about the benefits of making these commitments, and start off there. But it has to be a combination of the top and the bottom of an organization. It will never just be the leadership saying we want to do it with no grassroots support, and it'll never be just grassroots support without the leadership. We really have to have both. And then as soon as that's there, that's when we start seeing momentum and changing inside an organization.
That's great. Well, I'm wondering now, we're in 2024 and moving forward. What do you see the future of green software? Where do you see it going in the year ahead and really in the rest of this decade?
So, surprise, surprise, I think AI has taken us all by surprise over the last year. I think there's a really interesting stats that we used to talk about. We used to talk about the fact that ICT and kind of software's major driver of that was about 4 to 5% of global emissions, or 3 to 5% of global emissions. And then there was also studies that were done which are talking about how if we carried on the current trajectory, because software is a big growth industry, we would be about 14% by 2040. All those studies were done pre this AI shift that we're having right now. And I think there's a lot of questions we're asking ourselves inside the foundation. We're forming a green AI committees to kind of start figuring out what's going to happen. I think some of the hints from like the International Energy Agency released some data where they doubled the estimate for energy consumption because of AI, and everybody was like, "Are you sure? Is that?" No, yeah, we're pretty sure. So I think there's a lot of open questions right now how the impact of AI is going to drive this. I think we're not looking at 14% by 2040 now. We're looking at something significantly higher. So that's kind of a focus for green software now moving forward is going to be, well, what is the story? I don't know. I don't have answers for anybody right now, but it's like, what is the story? What is the questions? It's a big juggernaut that's happening. And my kind of philosophy is like, you have to figure out how to shift that juggernaut a little bit, not shut it down, because we're not shutting down this juggernaut. It's happening and it's moving. How do we make it shift in a way so it's not 30% of emissions by 2040? So that's kind of like where the challenges are, I'd say, even in the next year, but definitely in the next 5 years. That's I think, gonna be a lot of questions around that.
Oh, well, thank you so much. This has been so informative. Asim.
Next on Techstrong TV, we go back to our Predict conference from January. We have Yossi Carmen, CEO of Accelerario, as he explores the ways in which AI technologies are not just tools, but catalysts for personal growth and productivity. I think there are some who would disagree, but let's hear what Yossi has to say.
Hi. I'm Yossi Carmon. I'm the CEO of Accelerario, a pioneer in test data management technology, providing solution for R&D and DevOps team to shift left their development lifecycle using data masking and data visualization technologies powered by AI. So for me, AI is a synthesis of human-like intelligence, where it helps us or mimic our decision making in the way that it learns from data, algorithm, and it's built on like a lot of layers. Machine learning is the base, the backbone of AI that allows the systems to learn and improve over time, and it's based actually on data, and the data is the AI fuel. So without the data, we can't analyze, we can't learn. It's just true also for humans. All of that. On top of that, everything is based on algorithms. So the algorithms, it's actually the program, the analysis that we are doing over the data. And we have the neural network, like mimicking the brain. It helps recognizing all patterns and making decisions like we do. And at the end, we need our mouth, which is the NLP. It involves interactions between computers, people, and it's actually understanding us. And all of that, at the end of that, it's mimicking us the human capabilities, which for me is like another friend, another expert to brainstorm. Today, AI is part of my daily routines. Everything, almost everything I'm doing with it. It's like having great advisor next to you, helps you with everything. It's with my planning, it's with my brainstorming, to be my devil advocate. If I'm running in my head certain scenarios, I'm just playing with it. What would be if not, or what would be if yes? And then it's like researching. It's like sitting on Google search, but with the ability to understand what you're asking and to also bring to you more data. One of the things that for me, it's a mentor that you can have, expanding my own thinkings. And I think that we have, when we use or we advise with someone, what we expect from this other person, other side, is to help you think or take you to the points or to the boundaries, or push your envelope or push the boundaries of your way of thinking. And it's like, if you can't imagine that, if you never saw that, you can't imagine that. So that's for me AI. Sometimes it's taking me to a place that it brings a lot of other information and other knowledge from anyone else that I could think about that, but if someone wouldn't put it on my table to see it, I wouldn't see it, and I wouldn't think on that. So that's for me on my daily routines. I think that I'm using it to research, to build programs, to even initiate processes with others. That's also something that, and I think that everyone on the team knows that. So everyone knows that when I have an idea, it goes on my team. That most of my texts includes a lot of data, and the reason, and they know the reason, because I'm brainstorming with my AI, and I know this is part of the culture in Accelerate in general. It's not just me. I think that everyone I hired, it's part of what I saw the spark in them, because they are smart, they know their world and expertise, but they know how to expand to be more than just Brittany, to be more than just Caroline, to be more than just Laura, and take the advantage of AI, not just to talk internally with the team or externally with the management or the peers, but also take AI and think out of the box. This is how our team in Accelerate is using AI today.
I'm using the power of AI to improve our sales playbook by enhancing decision-making for both short and long-term strategies.
I use AI to help condense highly technical information into statements for marketing, product, and prospects alike.
I use AI to help me optimize my marketing campaigns for enhanced effectiveness and engagement.
Or until lately, that I'm asking what in companies was a project, because you need to recognize first which regulation you're under, and you are GPA, you need to comply with GPA, with the GDPR, sorry, or CCPA, or HIPAA, or PCI, whatever it is. And sometimes you have more than just compliancy, just one regulation. So you need to comply with all of them, or more than just one. And you have also a lot of fields in your database. And we're talking about terabytes. So it's millions of them. Now, in order to mask them, because you need to comply with the regulations, in order to mask them, you need to go over every field and decide, according to the data, if this field you need to mask or not. And the challenge is that most of the fields, most of the names are not that obvious. So it's not first name, the name of the field. It's not first name and then last name, and then sometimes it's C1, C17, C81, or whatever it is. So now you need to go through all the data and understand this is, oh, that's the first name. I got it. I need this is we need to mask it. And the combinations, and then you have more than one system. So it took months to onboard with data masking and take it to the next level, and then you need to continue and maintain that. And it was just lately. It wasn't like in the 60s, like ages ago. It's just like several months ago. With Accelera today, just in a click. It's crazy fast. So something that took you months to do without AI now takes hours with AI, months, and now it's a click. I'm selecting which compliancy, and I can have on my own compliancy. So for example, if I have my own IP, and I need to also comply that, so I need to mask it. I can't someone to see that, or I want to preserve that, or secure, sorry. And then I'm selecting GDPR, CCPA, PCI, and my own compliancy. Scan all my millions of fields in my database, my 10 terabytes database. It scans it for an hour or two. Then it goes back with you. This is my recommendation. Those are the million fields you need to mask. You say, okay, and that's it. And now everything is masked. And more than that, you don't need to have someone working on the data masking, and every field, the DBA that works needs to know a new field. Oh, is it sensitive? No. Is it sensitive? Yes. No, I need to add it to the masking policy. Oh, I need now to work again, and now I run it again. No. Accelera is doing it with AI on a daily routine. Every change in those databases, it will mask automatically. So I think it saves like tons amount of hours and efforts. And I think that one of the eureka in this area for us was that when one of the customers that we sold the data masking with AI, one of his main questions, or the fundamental questions, was, how many people do I need to invest in your data masking project, not product, project? And then we said, you don't need anything, just invest like 5 minutes on the screen, go make coffee, go eat lunch, whatever it is, come back. It will say, this is what you need to mask, click, mask it, and that's it. And he was shocked. And that's where we want to be. We want AI to help us do amazing things where we couldn't do it like just months ago. That most of the people that try AI, getting in that world, they try to like ask simple questions. For example, I need to write me a plan for strategic marketing. Okay, write me a plan for strategic marketing. And then the person that asked that, or it's even simpler, people don't know how to ask. So write me a marketing plan for 2024. And then AI is doing what AI is doing is too generic. So it writes a generic plan, but it's not aligned with what you need. And therefore, because it's not aligned, people say, okay, doesn't help me. But if you take AI, and if you're an expert in your field, and you know what to ask, and then you know how to research that. So to continue asking more questions and more questions, AI can be actually an accelerator of your capabilities. So instead of asking, if I'm talking about marketing, I want to build a plan for 2024 for marketing. So I would ask different questions. I would ask AI, build me a structure for my 2024 plan for marketing, and explain we are a TDM company, a SaaS TDM company, focused in the States and the UK markets, aiming to the mid-market and tier 1 and tier 2, or whatever it is, or aiming to those companies, and build me the structure, click, then you'll get something more specific to what you need. And of course, not every time it's aligned with what you expected. And then you need to continue and work with it. So continue to ask better questions. And at the end, you'll get something that you can start working. It makes sense, but you need to understand it makes sense for you, because otherwise it won't. You can't ask. And I think that's the most important with AI. Don't expect to be an expert in something that you're not. So if I'm not a developer, I'm not expecting AI to help me now develop things if I don't understand what I'm getting. And it's really important, because sometimes the results are stupid. So for example, if I'm asking AI, and we had that experience in in our R&D, we tried, one of the things that we're using AI for in Accelero is to shorten the development cycle internally. So not just using our data, our tools to help us expedite the development life cycle, but also help us like create things almost immediately. So we have the high level design, and then it goes to our team, and then we want to expedite that as well. And we have several things. One of the things that we try to take it like a use case, a simple use case, and ask AI, like, write me I think it was in Azure. Write me a code script in Azure to do blah, blah, blah. And then he wrote script, a code. This is what you should do. And then he took the code, run it in Azure, failed. And we went back to the AI and said, this code is failed. And then he replied back, oh, yes, it doesn't exist. The command does not exist in Azure. So that's stupid. But if you do not know that this command, you can't do it in Azure, or you can't do it in this platform, or you can't develop like that, so you'll go like a loop. You'll say it's not working. It would say, yes, here's another code, but at the end, you need to understand exactly what you're doing. So it's true for everything in the world. So it's also having a great expert helping you build your company. If you know how to build your company, or you only need like a sounding board, and this is AI, a sounding board. If you have that and you understand exactly what you're getting and what you need to ask, then this expert or this mentor could be the best for you. If not, if you don't know what to ask and you don't know what to expect, it's completely awful, and it will be disaster. So thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you can take something away from this talk and sharing about Accelero and about our culture and AI. And we will be happy to talk to you on AI, on TDM, on Accelero. Just ping us. You have the link below, and we'll be happy to share our experience, and maybe even you can use our tools.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
All right, next for you, we have an episode of DevOps Chat, another great podcast Mitchell and I host that if you don't catch it here, you can catch it on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or YouTube or any of the places where you watch or listen to podcasts. In this episode of DevOps Chat, Mitch and I dive deep into the heart of DevOps. You know, we've been at this 12 plus years now, and we're asking the big question: how has our investment in DevOps paved the way for organizational success, both now and in the future? So it's a big question with some big answers. Check out what Mitch and I have to say. Hey everyone, I'm Alan Schimmel.
And Mitchell Ashley.
And you're listening or watching
DevOps Chats.
Fantastic. Hey, Mitchell, I think it took us, what's this, the fourth one that since we restarted the series, and we finally got it right.
That's
Hot
right.
dog.
Old habits never die. I guess they do. But that's the fourth try.
Well, we just had to get our timing down. And because, when we used to record these, we didn't have Zoom and latency issues. We were sitting next to each other.
That's right. Yes. And, and Chantilly, Virginia, are getting ready to go.
Or wherever we were on the road.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's progress for you.
Exactly.
Or maybe not. Anyway, Mitchell, we've got a good DevOps chat lined up for this week. We're going to start incorporating something we really wanted to do, which was to kind of leverage this amazing library of interviews that we have from Techstrong TV, that really take great dives into, a subject like DevOps. We look at it 6 ways from Sunday, right? Into every aspect.
Yeah.
And so I'm excited to do that today. And it's an interview you did.
Yeah, with Ben Potter from Coder. We'll get into that very much so. There are over 6,000 videos on Techstrong TV now.
That's crazy.
DevOps or Techstrong TV YouTube channel is just like packed with content.
I think also it's probably 4,000 or more there. We might have purged it at one point, but I think it was 4,000 or something. And we'll be adding more to that, including this podcast we're going to start running on the YouTube, because we wind up playing episodes of the podcast now on the Techstrong TV daily feed, which then makes its way over to the Techstrong TV YouTube channel as well. So, this is like trying to look up old Star Trek episodes on where you can see them on streaming TV, and they're on Paramount and Netflix and Pluto TV and all these other stations. I think it's the same way.
I joined a Facebook group that's all about the original Star Trek, and I get all these posts, like, remember this episode, remember this, the Doom Machine, remember this, who was this character?
I think I belong to the same chat, to the same group.
That's pretty freaky.
I told you, I recently got a really great. I haven't seen you yet, so I haven't even worn it yet. I may just save it for a while, but it's the Star Trek episode with the alternate universe, Spock with a beard.
Yes, evil Spock, but kind of still good.
Still right. He still had the good core. Yeah, I can't. Maybe I'll save that for RSA. I'll wear that one day.
I think so. Or KubeCon or both. Maybe both.
Yeah, or maybe KubeCon in Paris. Mitchell, before we jump into Ben Potter interview, though, I thought we'd spend a little time talking about DevOps Next, as we're calling this great report you're starting to frame out right now. But really, the report is just a reflection of the actual marketplace, which is, next month, March 14th, actually, will be the 10th anniversary of DevOps.com. First time we published DevOps.com.
Wow, time flies.
Yeah. And DevOps, DevOps has been around at least 2 years before that. At least, maybe 3. But it's not the same DevOps. Well, in many ways it is, but in many ways it isn't the same DevOps as it was 12 years ago, right? And why don't you, take first crack at this? How do you think DevOps is different, or how do you think it's even the same as it was then?
I still remember you calling me up and say, "Hey, Mitch, there's this thing called DevOps. Do you know anything about this? I've got the domain for this DevOps.com. We're starting this site." And, I was like, "No, I'm not really that up on it. Let me go figure it out." And I went and read Gene's his book, and then introduced it to the IT team that I was running back then. But it was really early, and it was kind of hard to figure out exactly what it was. And then people started doing it and kind of learned some of the principles out of the book. And one of my first ahas was, okay, it's not a technology, it's a how. It's how you do software, how you create software. And technology is all in support of that. And it's kind of rethinking that. And of course, having the cloud and elastic resources available to you could change how you do software. Microservices and cloud native came along. So it's interesting. It's kind of like the way Agile was, that it really transformed away from monolithic thinking or waterfall thinking to more sprint and iteration, but doing that in a whole software development process and in pipelines. But it was still very tool centric in terms of this tool fits in this slice, this tool fits in this slice, and this fits here, and they all have their own ecosystem of plugins, or maybe they integrate, or maybe they don't. So you end up in the tool integration business as an IT team or development team. And today it feels like we're at a different place. I mean, it's not everywhere, and not everyone is doing DevOps at the same level. They're all on their own kind of curve of adoption. Some have been doing it for quite a while, but we've gotten to this place where there are platforms that you can do end-to-end DevOps if that's how your organization kind of thinks about solving this. There are sort of much broader suites. You start out as a CI tool, now we're a CI/CD, and we're this, and that, and with security, and with AI, and with this. So all that to say, the reason why we're doing this DevOps Next report is to try to lay out and help everyone, all of us understand, including me, understanding where we really are in the evolution of DevOps, but more importantly, how that's setting us up DevOps Next for the next 3-5+ years as we introduce more things, more AI, more generative AI, more different kinds of applications, more mobile to the apps that we're doing already on the web, or whatever the next technology or approach driver that comes along, app modernization, whatever it might be. To really recognize that it isn't just a set of discrete disciplines that we're hanging together in a linear process. It is really an ecosystem of capabilities that we can craft into the best way to create software.
I love it. Listening to you, Mitchell, I'm reminded of the old commercial line. I think it was Orson Welles, for Gallo Winery or whatever. You can't make wine before it's time. And you know what? You can't make DevOps before it's time either. Can you have a DevOps without Agile? Can you have a DevOps without Lean?
Mm-hmm.
Could you have DevOps without the cloud?
Exactly.
Can you have cloud native without DevOps?
I think that we're pretty sure, no. But yes, yeah. I mean, to your point it is, whether you're going to go back to the manufacturing side or think about how we're using Agile and Lean in software. The other thing that's happened with DevOps, well as I do, is it's the ideas behind it. Everybody has said, well, I can do that in my part of the business, right? I can do that in the product group. I can do that in operations. I can do that in my business strategy and planning. This iterative cross-functional teams, all those things we learned in Lean and Agile and brought in with us into DevOps. It was interesting when I think one of the first DevOps enterprise summits I went to, the auditors had a panel. They're all excited about being part of this. They could see how they could play as part of this whole process. And that was an eye opener. It's like, okay, this has gone far beyond what we thought it might be.
Far beyond just developers and ops.
Exactly.
And I think that's another. So I think that's a big lesson that will probably shine through in the DevOps Next report, which is, as much as everyone wants to focus on tools, it really isn't just the tools. It's the culture of having a cross-functional team, of doing things like blameless postmortems, of communication, open lines of communications, of trying to automate, go faster, but better. Right? We do it with our software, but we want, we talk about platform engineering. Platform engineering is part of this whole discussion too, right? Why do we do platform engineering? To go faster, to do more
productivity
with less, right? It's the same driver. It's part of the same dynamic of what drives DevOps. And I wouldn't have guessed this 10 years ago, because I think fell into the trap that a lot of other people did, which is, we focus on the tools. We focus on the tools.
Oh yeah. Well, that's what we buy.
Yeah. And that's who pays us here at DevOps.com, right? So we focus on the tools. But I'm really looking forward to see what do we hear about from a cultural perspective on DevOps and how people are taking that undefined, axiom around culture and applying it into real life business situations, not just software development. I think that's a big piece of this.
It's interesting for me because, the gray hairs mean I've been around for a while. I remember the methodology wars, and it's about you have to follow the methodology and which methodology is the best one. And this is the next better one. And it never set right with me because every organization operates differently, right? You can't force everybody into one mold and this is the right, because I call them the religious methodology wars. I mean, it really was. It's just like, you're going to heaven, you're not, because you're not following the methodology or whatever. And when Agile came out and really made a lot of sense to me because I'd already been part of the total quality management training, the iterative improvement and all the different techniques that we learned there, a way of making iterative progress and improving quality, whatever you're working on. And so when we got to a point of working together on DevOps, and you did DevOps.com to kick that off, it just seemed like a lot of things came together at the right time. Timing's everything. We know that from
absolutely. Timing is everything, and I think you're 100% right. I'll tell you, by the time this podcast is available, our newest site, Techstrong ITSM, will be out. And a lot of people may be saying, ITSM, that's not new. Where you? I got the AI thing, but why ITSM? Because when we think about the religious wars around process and around, how to do things, for a lot of people, ITIL, ITIL, right? ITIL is the very definition of it.
Mm-hmm.
But there's much more to ITSM, and even ITIL itself has changed over the years.
Yeah.
And I wrote, this was my opening story on Techstrong ITSM, my opening post, was that ITSM is part of this continuum that we have. Agile to where Agile leaves off, DevOps picks up. Where DevOps leaves off, ITSM picks up. And of course, there's places in there for things like platform engineering and SREs and SLOs and all of the various disciplines that have developed to fill in the gaps here. But it's definitely a continuum. And, I think one of the lessons learned is, again, would DevOps be here if not but for Agile Lean, and what would be cloud and blah, blah, blah? Had ITIL not been what it was, would DevOps have evolved differently? Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
And had DevOps not evolved, would ITIL still be what it was then instead of what it is now and what it's morphing into?
That's a perfect example. I remember interviewing a couple of folks from Axios that wrote updated ITIL to ITIL 4, I believe it is. And really
Axelos. It was Axelos.
Axelos, thank you very much.
Right.
And they were talking, and I didn't realize it, but they had gone back in that iteration and said, yeah, we kind of went down the process for process sake. That's my interpretation and prayer. It just got a little too dogmatic. Again, my words. But they went back and said, how do we incorporate this stuff from Agile and DevOps? And they did a yo person's job of trying to really open it up and make it more flexible and adaptable. And I'm sure that process continued, but I think that at least one of the reasons why ITIL and ITSM, both are still widely adopted. They didn't just kind of go by the wayside and something else replaced it. They're still a huge part of it.
And they're still evolving, as is DevOps. Mitchell, we could talk about this all day, but we're never going to get to your Ben Potter interview. Why don't you set the table for that one?
I'd love to. A few weeks ago, I got to speak with Ben Potter. He's head of product at a company called Coder. And I've long been interested in how the development environment is changing for software creators and, how far IDEs have come and cloud development and developing at a Starbucks or in the plane, on the plane. And one of the things that what Coder does is provide cloud development environments, right? So you can quickly stand up or utilize in an environment. And if you're starting out in software, it doesn't sound like that big of a deal. Maybe it saves you some steps, right? Or if you're starting out on a new project, it's a saver, an aid. When you're working in an organization where you might be supporting 5 or 6 applications, or even 2 or 3, there might be half a dozen environments or more for each one of those applications. There's this version with this database that we're supporting for these customers. Here's the second iteration of that. And you've got to have environments to be able to write code, test code, deploy it for each one of those iterations. And it gets really complex really fast. And as I was talking with Ben about, so I don't do this every day anymore. And it's for me to get, okay, what do I need to update to get this in sync with what's out there for that, even for our environments? It's a cognitive overload. And I'm not doing it full time every day across a lot of complex environments. And so it's a real productivity boost when you can turn it on and have that environment. And so it's pretty fascinating talking with Ben, because he talks about AI and some of the new things that are happening. I think folks will really enjoy listening to Ben. So any thoughts before we take a look at the video or listen?
No, you know what? I know Coder is going to be with us at KubeCon in Paris. I'm looking forward to catching up with them in person there. But let's roll. Let's go to the video from a recent Techstrong TV interview, and we'll be back right after.
Well, hey, everybody. I have a great pleasure of being joined by Ben Potter. Ben is head of product with Coder. Welcome, Ben.
Mitch, happy to be here.
Excellent. I'm glad to have you on. Talking about great things, and this has come up a couple times for me recently chatting. And when I was at KubeCon, I think in Chicago, and talking about cloud development environments. Matter of fact, even a friend of mine on an AI project and I were talking about that. So I'm really intrigued to chat with you. Let's just set some context for folks. If you don't know what a cloud development environment, hopefully the name describes it well enough, but is there any more you should know when we're talking about what is a cloud development environment?
Yeah, the very basics are we're trying to replace developer laptops, meaning developers will always need a laptop or a desktop, but so many applications and are moving to the cloud, yet developers still have to run these applications, whether it's one service, 10 services, or even dozens of services, all on their local machine, or some hybrid where they're running some on their local machine, some on the cloud. And as these environments get more complex, especially in large enterprise organizations, it becomes unrealistic to be able to run these on the local machine, especially when developers essentially forced to use a lockdown Windows machine. So what we see happening is developers are creating virtual machines, they're running their code there. That also has a drift from the place they're deploying it. So what a cloud development environment tries to do is give developers a very identical environment to that of which they're deploying that they can test and develop against using their favorite editors, whether that's VS Code or JetBrains. So sometimes when people think cloud developer environments, they think of a browser editor with limited tools and limited keyboard shortcuts. That's not the case. Developers can keep using their editors, but really they have an environment they're developing against that's very similar to where they'd be deploying. So that's kind of the main concept, or at least that's how we define it at Coder.
Great. And then do you actually, IDE tools, like if you're using Visual Studio or whatever your favorite Python or whatever IDE is, some of those have integrated with it, like Homebrew for your Apple, right? To be able to do package management and update and set environments in different contexts. I have to be honest with you, at least for me, I don't do it every day, but when I do it, it's kind of complex to go back and remember. Now, how do I set that? Where's that? Do I need to upgrade this? Is that set up with my environment where I'm pushing this to? It's it taxes me, and I'm not doing hard stuff either.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We have users who have to follow maybe 30 to 45 steps to get their environment set up. And those steps are oftentimes very specific to an operating system or a version of an operating system where if someone upgrades to an M1 Mac, for example, and they were previously on the Intel ones, it's a whole new set of steps and that hasn't been updated. So what a lot of our users do is they automate away all those steps so a developer can just click a button, and using these powerful cloud technologies such as Docker and virtual machines or even Kubernetes, developers can get these reproducible environments with all their tools set up. So essentially it turns those 30 steps into one. I mean, someone has to automate it and create those images, but it's kind of a one-to-many relationship where you kind of have the confidence that everyone on the team can use those same tools.
Cool. So what's the developer experience like? Are they using an IDE that's running locally on their environments, connecting to a cloud development environment? Are they using an IDE in the cloud? How does that work?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And there's two paths that we can support. So the modern editors, which VS Code and JetBrains are the two main ones, have support for running them locally on your machine, meaning you can have your theme, your keyboard shortcuts, your layout, but then you're connecting over essentially SSH into these remote servers where the file system and the terminal is. So all the tools are pre-installed on the remote server, but then it's kind of this like thin client server model. The other option is entirely through the web browser, which is pretty magical. Both Microsoft as well as us at Coder have a version of VS Code that runs entirely in the web browser. And in that case, the full IDE is running remotely, and a developer could connect with even an iPad or a Chromebook and do the development that way. So that one's there are some limitations. You don't get all your shortcuts, but if you're kind of quickly switching between services, it's a great workflow.
I could see that, especially like, hey, Ben's on vacation. I've got to step in and yeah, I kind of know that environment, but I'd sure like a turnkey, press a button, press a browser, browser key. I'm in, and I don't have to worry about, making sure my IDE will connect to it. And okay, where's the cert or credentials, et cetera, to get to that. And then how do I move around?
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's kind of, it's great for those kind of times that you only need to go into the environment maybe once a month. It's maybe a service that you don't always maintain, or like you said, like maybe I'm on vacation and I only have my iPad and I need to hop on and do something. You can kind of have the ease of mind that it's all there and working.
Mm-hmm. And we talk a lot about, I'm trying to remember the term, but the cognitive load, that's the word, that we put on developers. We do that in all kinds of jobs, but we especially put it on developers there's cognitive load of building your environment, and there's cognitive load of like doing your job, and then there's everything else too. And that context switch across all of those is maddening. I mean, that's where you lose your productivity. I think of software akin to writing a book. You're not going to write a book a sentence at a time. You're going to sit down and write a chapter or write part of one or this part of the story or whatever. And you got to stay there a while, right? You can't deal with interruptions. That's why developers wear noiseless headphones all the time if they aren't working from home. How does a cloud environment help you with cognitive load and context switching?
Yeah, our tagline actually is keep developers in flow. And we use that both internally. So how can we make sure that when we're meeting with the development team, it's only in certain times and we can reduce meetings, and also externally in the products that we build. One of the main ways that we help with that is there's this huge expectation from like the DevOps kind of paradigm for developers to start building their applications with best practices in mind, whether that's where they download their packages from, or how often they scan, or what kind of languages and libraries they use. And with Coder, you can essentially create these recipes for developers to get into an environment that has all of those things installed for them. So if a developer goes to install a package, they don't even need to configure or run security scans. You can have confidence that they're downloading it from a trusted source, wherever those artifacts are and wherever you're scanning it from. We're also seeing that with AI and LLM tools. We have a lot of our enterprise customers pre-installing these tools in for the developers so that it can kind of handle these operations that normally it's pretty difficult to enforce or even like encourage developers to use these best practices. But by having them by default in their editor, where they spend the majority of their time, they don't have to spend a lot of time switching out of your editor and doing other stuff. I think there's like a pretty famous quote that like it takes 15 minutes to like a context switcher to fully get back into flow. So as much as possible, having these best practices pre-installed inside your editor, as opposed to having to go out and read some wiki to get things set up the right way, the better. So we're essentially trying to only really let developers focus on like what they need to, which is like the libraries and the code, and then the rest can kind of take care of itself through automation.
I like to say the best way or fastest way to get something done is not to have to do it at all, right? Like just let it be done for you, right? If you can. Well, let's talk about the AI side of this, because one of the questions I have is about a cloud development environment is, not all the resources could be put in the cloud or into your environment, right? I have databases, I have APIs that I'm testing with to third-party services, my own applications, a plethora of things that, there is no application is an island, right? It's all connecting to everything. How do you deal with that? Deal with when you need to talk to other services, or maybe in your LLM, your training data, and you need to keep that updated with the latest that you're using or that's coming, getting ready to get pushed to production. How do you deal with the external things that aren't in your cloud environment?
Yeah. So we have a kind of policy, the way we deliver our software, that we only want it to be self-hosted, meaning we give the software to our customers and they install it in their AWS or on-prem environments. That's because we have a lot of secure, regulated customers who really much value owning their network. So that gives them control over which endpoints and network things they want to expose. So one example I had earlier was ensuring that artifacts only get downloaded from a secure artifact store, as opposed to the public registries such as Docker Hub or NPM, where there's so many vulnerabilities.
It's all
there.
good. It's all secure. Don't worry.
Exactly. And on the AI side, we do have even some of the most like regulated customers using AI with Coder, but they have control over those network firewalls, whether they have an on-prem model that they're using or something exposed through ChatGPT. They expose only the aspects that they want. What's super interesting about AI to me is that even the customers that really value security are accepting the risk to use these AI models because of the productivity benefits that they have. And at Coder, you can we use it because it's self-hosted. You have control over the full network that it's deployed on. Another use case we've seen is it's pretty difficult to get developers access to GPUs. There's a way for developers to like schedule, if you're doing AI development, maybe to schedule out to a build farm. And another use case that we've seen for people who are doing very advanced AI development is they want a full GPU workspace in the cloud, or even multiple workspaces. So we have templates at Coder to let developers get a workspace with a GPU attached. So if they're training a model or working against if they're working against a local LLM that isn't like training based on your company data, that they have the horsepower to do so in their cloud.
Excellent. How about data protection, right? Test data. Right? You need to test with realistic data. Sometimes it's, data you don't want to escape, right? You don't want that data leaked. How do you protect assets like that? Sounds like what you just described would help with that. If you're running it within your own, you're in your own environments with your own security controls.
Yeah, that's a really good question. The way that we're seeing our users doing this now is they're deploying a database with either customer data or mock customer data inside the same network that they have Coder deployed in, meaning that a developer doesn't have to open a firewall on their local machine to access it. They're only connecting it to it through their cloud IDE. So this cloud IDE is on the same network as the customer data or test data or mock data, and multiple developers are able to develop against it. So they're not downloaded onto each CDE. They're not downloaded onto each local laptop, which is a huge security risk. It's all staying within the boundaries of your network, and it can even stay within the boundaries of a web browser, which then can be secured to make sure people aren't copy and pasting out of it and doing things like that. So the real benefit there is because you can put Coder in your own network where the data is. It never has to leave that network. It can all just stay in the web browser or on that environment.
So kind of last question. I could talk to you for another 2 hours, but last question is, right tool for the right job, right? What are things that aren't a great, fit for trying to use a cloud development environment? So don't go down that path. That's not the best way to do it.
Yeah, anything that's super latency sensitive. So web development is a perfect example of what's great. You can develop against a modern editor such as VS Code. You can preview your changes in the web browser. That's great. If you're developing a video game, you'll run into some issues because the game is compiling and developing and essentially being sent back. So you can get a full desktop environment through Coder, but it's pretty slow and it's not ideal. I'd much rather do game development on my local laptop. Another one that comes to mind is iOS development. Again, this is one of those things where technically it could be done. We created our product to run on Mac hardware, but there isn't a great solution for provisioning Mac hardware for iOS development. There's some solutions out there that I'm closely looking at because I'm interested. But if you're doing any form of kind of app or game or even desktop development, it's not ideal. Again, it can be done if you have some of those pain points, such as like data security. But web development using Visual Studio Code as well as like JetBrains is really the sweet spot that we're seeing now. What I think some people think when they hear CDE is that if you have a large complex service, it's actually not a good fit for a CDE. And we're actually seeing the opposite, which is the more complex the service you have, the more you benefit from automating those steps away and giving it to a developer. And I think something else is if people think maybe if they're later or earlier on in their cloud native journey, that it's not a good time for CDEs until they're fully onto the cloud. And the opposite is also true. We have some of our largest customers are using CDEs to get more developers to develop applications for the cloud with those practices. So those are kind of two things that you might think wouldn't be a good fit, but would. But yeah, the game development is not, it's not great. I tried it. It's not fun.
Yeah, it's always those edge cases or unique cases. And you mentioned Mac, and Xcode isn't really happy to run itself in other environments. I'm sure that's a bit of a challenge. Well, where can folks kick the tires? Anybody that's a developer, technical person, we'd like to, let us turn us loose, let us check it out, kind of see how it works.
Yeah, our website is coder.com and our GitHub is also Coder. So it's pretty easy to remember. On the website, you can get a trial to try the enterprise features, but the core product itself is actually open source. So if you're a developer and want this either for your home setup or maybe a small team, entirely free. And then we have that enterprise trial on coder.com as well.
Okay, excellent. Well, Ben, it's been fascinating talking with you. I'm definitely headed there. I'm going to go check it out. So coder.com, right? Is it .com?
That's right. Yeah, coder.com.
You always got to ask these days because sometimes it's not. I hope you'll come back again. It's been fascinating talking with you, Ben Potter, head of product with Coder. Thanks, man.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you.
Mitchell, that was a great interview. Did a nice job there with Ben, and good for them. I like what Coder's doing.
It is, and Ben was fantastic to talk to because he's working with so many different customers and he's got all these experiences and use cases, and as well as heading up product. He's not just a product, here's the roadmap and here's where we're going. He's really out there pressing the flesh and rubbing elbows with developers and figuring out what they need. So I think that's what made it such a compelling interview and discussion with him.
Yep. Many thanks to Ben and the Coder folks. Mitch, I think we're probably a little over time because of the interview and everything, but this was a great DevOps chat. We'll be back next week with another one.
Sounds good. Same place, same bat station, bat channel, right?
Yeah, wherever you're listening to this, keep that dial where it is. For Techstrong and DevOps Chat, this is Alan Schimmel.
And Mitchell Ashley.
Take care.
We'll see you soon.
Discover the cutting-edge insights of our new show, AI Times, a series that explores the limitless potential of artificial intelligence. Sponsored by the AI Infrastructure Alliance, the AI Times is at the forefront of the AI revolution, tackling the crucial questions of how we can leverage AI for the betterment of humanity. Stay ahead of the curve as this show delves into all things surrounding AI, including trends, pressing concerns and the positive impact AI is making around the globe. AI Times.
Next up, we have Two Views with Vizard. In this first episode, Mike sits down with Tatum Tumans, product manager for FinOps at Keon, and he's going to explain why any effort to optimize cloud spending needs to start with training that is often sorely lacking in an era where IT teams remain understaffed.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Tatum Tumans, who's a FinOps product manager for Kion, and we're talking about, well, what is going on in the cloud and costs, because it feels like they're spiraling out of control and we don't have the tools to maybe understand what's going on in there. And even if we had the tools, would we know how to use them? Hey, Tatum, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Mike. Good to be here.
So, what's your assessment of the current state of things? I feel like we basically gave developers free rein and developers do what developers do, and then we're surprised when things get a little expensive. So where is this whole process for cloud cost control breaking down?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think about how my entire life I've had a smartphone, right? But I was an Android user. And I recently made the switch to Apple, and it's taken me months to figure out little things that I would have never expected. And you think about that little case where millions of dollars aren't on the line, right? When you're talking about a company's cloud infrastructure, I think we're setting up our technical folks to not be successful because we're handing them tools to go build and go create without actually taking a moment to pause and teach them how to do it really well. And in some cases, we've got folks who have spent their entire lives working on-premise data centers, and the cloud is a brand new technology, and we're not setting them up for success.
It feels like a lot of them, shall we say, learn by doing. And so they jump in there with, APIs and SDKs or whatever else they can find. But do they really understand the economics of the cloud and what it is that they're invoking, and can they correlate that to a cost?
Yeah, I think the concept is easy for folks to understand, that you pay for what you use. But when you're actually in the cloud making decisions, I use something as simple. We see it all the time. I saw it as a practitioner in a former life, and now talking to customers in a product management role, where little things like, I deleted an instance, I expect that cost to end. But what they don't realize is, let's say maybe the storage volume that was associated with that instance didn't get deleted, right? That's like an extra step. And if you've never taken that step before, you have no idea that you just created waste that might sit there for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days before finally someone or a tool flags it as waste. And so there's countless examples across services on all the cloud providers of things that until you do, you don't learn.
So who's driving the adoption of these FinOps processes to kind of bring some adult supervision? Who wakes up in the morning and goes, yeah, we got to get our arms around this?
Yeah, it's interesting. So, I started in the FinOps space about 7 years ago, before that term was really popularized. And there were folks like me who just knew nothing about cloud technology, but had a finance or business background and just wanted to help and got involved. And then about 4 or 5 years ago is when the FinOps Foundation really took off and started to put some terminology and naming to some of these things. And since then, there's now an entire, curriculum set around, hey, this is what people like you are struggling with, and here's ways to approach your problems, here's tools to approach your problems and those things. What I think is interesting is we're seeing companies start to buy in a little bit more on the idea of what FinOps is. And it's not just trying to save money or cut costs. It's ultimately a way that it's an intersection point of how you should run your IT organization. So it's a way of investing, I would say, almost cross-functionally, and teaching, even in some cases, your technical resources how to think a little bit more on the cost side. There's now tools in every kind of niche of the market that are trying to solve and make it easy for engineers to take action on kind of the infrastructure that they own. But it's also folks like myself in a prior life that just want to help solve the problems, right? Help make things cheaper, help get, grow the business value of the cloud. And so what's interesting is FinOps can be done by an engineer, a technical resource, or it can be done by a financial analyst. It's kind of a catch-all.
As we go through this whole process, it seems like we just need some adult supervision, but where does that get put in place? Because theoretically, I could put some sort of control mechanism next to the developer and give them more transparency into what the costs are for what they're consuming. Or do I need more guardrails in the DevOps workflow, and I'm just going to do it more from the platform engineering side of the equation?
Yes, it's interesting. So right now, the state of the FinOps survey just came out about a week ago, maybe a week and a half ago now. And in that, they list kind of the key priorities, and you see enabling automation kind of creeping up the priority list year after year. And what I think folks are looking for in that realm is kind of what you're referring to is, how do I put these guardrails that allow my technical resources to go be successful, go build great products and applications, but have something in place that stops them from these cost overruns? You hear these horror stories of folks, losing thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars in a day because they just weren't aware something was running. And so there's lots of FinOps tooling out there that just has simple anomaly detection or enforcements of saying, hey, if my developer spends over X per day, I want to know about it, or I want to shut off all capability of continuing to develop. And so you don't even need to do that in-house anymore. There are tools that come with that capability out of the box. The difficulty is, I think when people buy a tool, a FinOps tool, if you will, they think that their problems are solved, and they don't realize that they need to learn how to utilize the tools to gain success from them.
So does that mean we need to put everybody back in FinOps training, which on the face of it sounds a little bit kind of like going to traffic school and maybe as exciting?
I think that all positions within a company would benefit from some sort of FinOps curriculum. So, the foundation offers what they call like a practitioner certification. That's kind of the basics of like, what is FinOps? What are the things that you need to be considering? What are the processes you need to know? They also recently launched a engineering FinOps focused course. Now, I have not taken that myself. It's rather new. I think we're within maybe 2 months now of it being launched. So I can't necessarily speak to its value directly, but they are trying to create content that is both role specific while keeping this idea that FinOps is a cross-functional, anyone can implement it at their company concept.
Might AI one day just kind of save us from ourselves? We could have a bunch of algorithms figure all this out for us. I mean, we got the data. So, why not just make this one of the first use cases for an ROI for investing in AI?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think we're going to see, that's another one of the priorities you keep seeing picking up year after year when people are experimenting with what AI is going to do in terms of eliminating cost. I do think one of the things that's tricky about the cloud, and when you're talking about production systems and customers using what it is that's running on the cloud, I think we're going to continue to still need some sort of human involvement for a long time here, because as good as AI can be, it's still sometimes missing the context of, why does this instance need to be running 24/7? Because there might be a customer that only logs in once a month, but whenever they log in, they need to be able to log in. And sometimes, the algorithm itself might be suggesting that it needs to be right-sized or even deleted. And so I think there will be advancements made, but in terms of full AI automation, we're still going to need people who know this and know how to evaluate, where savings might be. I think of forecasting, for example. That's a place that a lot of businesses need help with. What am I going to spend over the next year, 2 years, 3 years? And they're looking for AI to try to make some suggestions on, this is what my run rate looks like. And once again, it's still missing a lot of that human context of, well, what are your migration plans? What's your revenue plans? What are some things there that it's just hard to make that full picture strictly through automation.
As we get down the path, are the cloud service providers doing enough here to educate people and walk them through this thing? Or do they have kind of a vested interest in, quote unquote, making it as easy as possible?
it's always a funny conundrum, right? They want to support their customers, but they obviously make money from their customers, right? I will say in the last year, I feel like they have done, they've made great leaps in terms of just making their platform a little more cost focused and trying to make things easier. The four major cloud providers, AWS, Azure, Google, and Oracle, have all now committed to what's called the Focus Standard. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's basically this initiative to get all cloud billing and eventually SaaS billing into the same format, right? So everyone's speaking the same language, columns are the same, and they've all made commitments and have already shown like dedication to that. So they are moving the needle. The problem is, and I don't have the current 24 stats in front of me, but most organizations are multi-cloud. And so being able to see all of your data and make decisions and drive cost savings or efficiency, you need to be able to see all of that in one place, which is where tooling often comes in, is to try to give you that full picture. And that's where, there's still going to be a big gap for a company that's multi-cloud.
Are people reevaluating what workloads go in the cloud? Because we had the COVID era, and that was the only place to run anything. And I think a lot of people may be looking at that now and saying there are still certain classes of workloads that probably run more cost effectively outside of the cloud. So in the current economic climate, are you seeing people revisiting their cost analysis for the cloud in general?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I think there was in January, there was a company that did a big blog post on how they actually reverted completely out of the cloud and went back to on-prem 100%. And I've seen some other places discussing that as a strategy. I'm sure there are use cases where it truly is more cost efficient for some applications to still not run in the cloud. But I think what's happening is the sticker shock of mismanaging those migrations to the cloud and kind of going back to this lack of training, right? Not teaching engineers how to architect effectively, right, for cost, or how to watch out for waste and opportunities to make it cheaper once it's in the cloud. I think it causes some of the C-suite executives to rethink, right, what was once their strategy. And I struggle, and this is where I wish I could help everyone, is kind of going through the analysis of, is this actually more expensive in the cloud, or is it just more expensive with how you've set it up in the cloud, right? That's the key. And so to answer your question, I do think we're seeing a little bit more tension, right, with folks not just defaulting to everything cloud first. But for the most part, I think it's still going to continue to grow, and it'll be more edge cases where we see folks go the other way.
So is this roughly the equivalent of, I don't know how to drive a Ferrari, so I'm going to go get my Buick? I mean,
yeah. And the other thing I find interesting is, especially with how much like mergers and acquisitions happen every day, you might have a company with a lot of great knowledge and great skill set within one of the cloud providers. And then they get purchased by a larger company that uses a competitor, right? A different cloud provider. Now you've got technical folks who've spent the last decade getting really good at something, and you're going to ask them to learn slightly different technology and learn how to then take these apps and maybe migrate to the cloud provider of choice. And it's even something that subtle is overlooked, where now you're not as familiar. You're essentially building applications that are less efficient, and the costs go up. And that's when, regret or maybe a misunderstanding of what's going on takes place at the leadership level.
Are people moving workloads between cloud service providers because of cost issues these days? Historically, there's tended to be this, we made a decision and that's our primary platform, and we've got some sort of enterprise volume agreement that we're trying to hit. But are people coming back to that now and saying, yeah, maybe certain workloads actually run significantly less costly on a different cloud service?
Yeah, it's definitely happening. You're right. These cloud service providers are very sticky, right? Once you're there, you're often there for good. But there's a couple of things that are happening, and I won't get too specific, but there are certain companies that are going into other markets that might cause you to rethink, do I want to use this service provider when I might be a competitor somewhere else in my business, right? So then you might need to make the shift for competitive reasons, or in my prior life, we had customers who came to us and said, we're actually only going to use workloads that exist in this service provider, which caused us to rethink decisions that we'd already made and force that migration from one to the other. So it's still happening, but there are a lot of tools that have made advancements in showing or trying to show which service provider is best for your application and doing that analysis for you. And I think as those gain traction, we're going to have folks who realize I actually can make a shift to another service provider and have a cheaper, workload for the next 10 years if I'm willing to make the investment for the next, couple months of making the migration.
We are also seeing a lot more workloads that are AI driven. Does that change the math on the cloud? Because not only do I have to train it, but now I got the inference engine and I'm not quite clear where that always goes. And GPUs are hard to find and they're expensive. And there's all these alternative processors. Is it going to get harder?
Yeah, I think before I changed roles, we were really, making a lot of investments in innovation in that area. And we definitely had some horror stories with cost and there's a couple instances where, overnight or over on the weekend, something was left running and it was doing its machine learning, right? And that had cost associated with it. I think this is an area that folks are not necessarily prepared yet to handle on like what the cost might look like. I also think it's an area though that companies know is a little bit uncharted. And so there's like perhaps more of an expectation for cost volatility. But we're definitely going to see advancements in the tooling side, trying to help companies get their arms around how do you control, these machine learning innovation bets that you're making from a workload standpoint.
All right. So what's your best advice to folks that are trying to figure out how to wrap their arms around FinOps?
My best advice is find the people in your organization that are either passionate about this or have the skill set to start learning and building out some sort of FinOps program. I think the mistake that companies make is they think they need to go invest in a resource that doesn't exist in the company, right? They need to go pay someone and add headcount. And I don't think that's necessarily the case. That most companies have folks who have the skill set and the knowledge to start to disseminate, internally the education needed for here's what you look out for, here are some processes we need, and start to build out what is typically referred to as like a champions program. You need FinOps champions within your org that are, cost conscious and thinking about these things. From there, many companies need a tool or some sort of third party support. I think often the cost around those, it feels like it's worth our investment. But I think what companies will find is as your cloud costs grow, you need that extra support of having automation built into your cost controls, and also just give your organization a single pane of glass of here's the visibility into what we're spending each day. Those things go a long way. And so go back to your question, my piece of advice is find the folks in your organization that are passionate about this and empower them to start kind of building out a FinOps practice.
All right, folks, you heard it here. There was a time when we tore our hair out over simple things like capacity planning in on-premises environments. And today the cloud makes all that look like child's play. But that which you do not pay attention to gets expensive really quickly. Hey, Tatum, thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, and back to you guys in the studio.
In our second view with Rizard, Mike sits down with Matt Unangst. I mispronounced, I apologize. Senior Director for Commercial Client and Workstations for AMD. And Mike and Matt dive into the impact applications infused with AI that will have will have an impact on IT infrastructure requirements. It's not just NVIDIA. AMD's coming on strong for AI processing.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Matt Unangst, who's Senior Director for workstations and client systems in the commercial side of AMD. And we're talking about this survey that they did about there's a gap between what's happening with AI on the business side and perhaps where the IT folks are. And we're going to dive into that in a minute. Matt, welcome to the show.
Great to be here. Thanks for making the time.
So, Matt, it kind of feels like the business side is having, shall we say, a certain amount of irrational exuberance around what the possibilities are for AI. And the IT side of the house is looking at it and saying, well, hold on there, Cappy. There's a few things we got to do first before we get to this promised land. So what's your read on where are we on this journey? Is this just another example of the divide between IT and the business, or is something else afoot here?
It's a great question, Mike, and I think it's a challenge that a lot of organizations are trying to work through right now. I think on the business side, there's a lot of potential around some of these AI solutions. Businesses see the opportunity to make their employees more productive, to give them more tools, to make them more efficient and make better decisions on a regular basis. And a lot of the promise of AI, shows high probability that we're going to get there. At the same time, IT organizations right now are looking at what is a very new technology, and they're trying to fit it into constrained budgets, constrained data center, footprints. And they're working through a lot of the typical, IT focused areas such as security and deployment. And so, there is a bit of a gap right now between the desire from the business side and where IT departments are from a deployment perspective. But that's a gap that I think we're going to see close, relatively rapidly over the next year or two.
Now, your survey that you guys did kind of suggested the IT side of the house is trying to build something that feels like a 5-year plan. The business side is, of course, they're all the same. Their biggest fear is being left behind, and they're worried that the competitors are going to move forward. Are these two goals incompatible, or can we kind of get to something in the short term but still have a long-term plan and we can be adults about and kind of count on as what we want to do?
I certainly think there's a number of near-term opportunities here. I mean, if you think about even some of the early deployments of AI PCs, these start to deliver some incremental benefits around certain applications that we use every day, like video conferencing, for example. With some of our AI technologies, we're able to deliver longer battery life, which does translate into a better employee experience and in some cases productivity. So there's going to be some near-term opportunities to take advantage of the early versions of this AI technology. But of course, the businesses are always going to be pushing for the next greatest thing and the next new, advancement in productivity. And so I think it's a space where we're going to see the businesses pushing their IT departments to, advance their capabilities, advance their solutions as rapidly as possible. And I would not expect that that's a trend that we see change, for 3 to 5 years. As I think, this AI journey that we're on, we're in the very early stages of this, and I expect that it's going to continue to be pretty dynamic for the foreseeable future.
Do you think this will drive a wave of infrastructure upgrades both on the client and the server side? Because it seems to me a lot of this AI stuff is really data intensive, and we're not quite set up to handle that.
The AI stuff is very data intensive. These AI models, take up a tremendous amount of data and compute capability. And so, yes, there is going to have to be an upgrade cycle around both the data center and the client side of things. Frankly, I think, deploying a lot of these AI tools is going to be scalable only if a number of the tools and applications are available on the client side or on the endpoint and the edge. But I also think there's going to be a big focus on building out the data center capabilities as well. And as we look at, different regions, are different, but we still see that data center capacities are very high today. And so that's one of the challenges that, a lot of organizations have with deploying these tools is they need to consolidate their data centers to more efficient servers so they can open up space that then allows them to, actually use that space and power capability for some of these AI specific applications.
What do you think that the inference engines are going to look like for these things? Because we talk about AI all the time and people are like, well, we got to train them and we got all these GPUs. But on a practical level, it's the inference model is the thing we deploy, and that may be only in terabytes and maybe getting more efficient as we go along. So do we have a firm understanding of what's required when we talk about AI?
I think we do. I think it's an evolving space, and I think it's a space where a lot of these AI models we're seeing become more efficient almost daily. We're seeing, new models come out I think if you take a step back, almost, really about a year ago, Chat GPT came out and it shocked the world in terms of just the user experience and the capability that it had. It's amazing how far we've come in, just about a year. And now you have a lot of, additional models or new models that are smaller in terms of their data sets, more targeted in terms of their use cases. And that's going to allow, some of these capabilities and experiences to scale much more broadly than, anybody really thought possible, again, 6 months or a year ago. So I do think, there's a lot of new capabilities there. I think getting more and more efficient around these models while we continue to advance the hardware that we deliver, again, across the data center, the edge, and the endpoint. That combination is going to allow a lot of these AI tools and models to be more deployable and more scalable instead of being, isolated just to the data center.
It seems like this fits in with a larger trend where we're trying to process and analyze data at the point where it's created in the first place, and the AI model needs to sit alongside that. Who's in charge of kind of understanding those infrastructure questions, and who's kind of being the architect for all of that?
Well, first off, I do agree with the trend of, more and more of these models wanting to process the data kind of where they're at. I think there's a lot of considerations there. When you push a large sets of data up into the cloud, that can be time intensive. You could kind of get a slower response. And so you, in a lot of cases, get a better user experience or faster and better performance by doing it local. Of course, organizations also have security considerations or privacy considerations when they think about, processing this data locally versus pushing it into the cloud. In terms of who's in charge, it's really up to each organization and their IT department to figure out what's the optimal way for them to deploy a set of AI solutions. And one of the things that we believe from an AMD perspective is there's no one size fits all approach to AI. So certain models are more ideal to be run in the data center. Others are going to be more ideal for edge solutions, and yet others will be more ideal for like the PC endpoint type of device. And so it's really, our guidance when we work with our customers is figure out what your AI strategy is, figure out exactly what AI tools you want to deploy, and then let's have a conversation around what's the right place to go deploy those tools depending on what you're trying to accomplish.
And there's a lot of nuance in that, because while I may use GPUs to train the AI model, the inference engine can run almost on anything. And sometimes those GPUs are expensive or hard to find. So will people need to figure out that balance of training versus execution of the AI model are kind of completely different motions?
There are different motions, and especially on the inference side, I think, there are certainly opportunities to deploy those inference solutions with GPUs. There's also, we increasingly are, up-leveling our Rise, what we call Ryzen AI, and we have a dedicated inference accelerator built into our mobile processors and now our new desktop processors. And there's a lot of models that are ideally run on that accelerator that we call an NPU. So some of these models are going to be best run on those types of inference accelerators. Other models may be best run on a GPU. And we're working closely with a large set of ISVs to figure out for each of their applications and models, what is the best, hardware and model for them to run on. And so that's something that, is a big investment and focus for us now and will continue to be for, really the next few years.
All right. Does this mean hardware is going to be cool again? I think for a long time we took it for granted, but there's a lot of subtlety in this space now.
There is no question that this is driving a significant uptick in innovation around hardware design. And I think that's true across, the entire portfolio, again, the data center, the edge, the endpoint. We're even having conversations around how we can use some of our expert class workstation products as really ideal edge AI solutions, just because of the memory footprint that they support and the size of the data models they can support. So it is driving, a very different conversation. It's not just kind of the typical rinse and repeat that we've seen for many years. And so as we continue to see advancement in the software and the models, the hardware's got to be right there with it. And so that's a big focus for us, is to make sure that the hardware stays exciting, relevant, and really kind of leading edge.
So based on the survey results and what you see going on out there, what's your best advice to organizations to bring together all their hardware and software folks to kind of drive this, not to mention the few data scientists that are running around and some data engineers, but how do I wrap my arms around all these people?
step number one is you have to figure out how you want to use AI to enable your business. And that's just foundational, because if you have certain goals from a business perspective and you can figure out how AI tools can help you achieve those goals, then we can start to have more targeted conversations on what is the right set of hardware, what are the right set of applications and AI models that you want to deploy. And I think where, a lot of organizations have struggled, at least in the very early stages of this, is there's a lot of AI hype. There's a lot of kind of, hand waving, talking about AI is going to revolutionize all of these, experiences and the employee capabilities, but it's been very vague, right? And so taking that conversation, getting down to a very specific set of goals around how we want to use this technology to help the business, then we can translate that into very tangible, next steps in terms of figuring out the right hardware and the right applications.
All right, folks, you heard it here. All the software in the world doesn't run unless it has some good hardware underneath it. So you kind of have to do these things together, hand in hand. Hey, Matt, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it.
All right, and back to you guys in the studio.
Hope you enjoyed this episode of Techstrong TV. We will be back tomorrow with our normal Techstrong TV and Techstrong gang. And then starting Wednesday, we're in Paris live for KubeCon. Check us out. We'll be streaming throughout the day, replaying it for different time zones. And it should be a great KubeCon in Paris. We'll have some great content there. Until then, though, this is Alan Schimmel. Be well, be safe, be strong. Techstrong.